sounds of Borley? Or had it always been there, just waiting for new visitors? But it would be 1 year after the completion of the new rectory that the legend would properly take root. The rectory was often used as a place for local children to come and play after school. One afternoon, the rector was in his study writing. He could hear the sounds of one group of children running around the house, laughing and talking with each other. He had wanted to shoo them back out into the courtyard, but thought he should finish his work first. Suddenly, the voices dropped to hushed tones, piquing the interest of the rector. The children had entered the drawing room in the east wing of the house. The room was shrouded in darkness, and as soon as the children entered, they were hit with an uneasy feeling. Curiosity or misplaced bravado got the better of them, however, and the children edged deeper into the dark room. It didn't take them long to notice it. At the far end of the room by the wardrobe, there was a figure moving back and forth, barely visible in the shadows. The children all became frozen to the spot, just watching this figure pace back and forth in front of the wardrobe until it stopped. The figure turned to face the children, and in one smooth motion began to move towards where they were standing. As it drew close, its face was illuminated. Far from being a shadow, it appeared to be an older woman, her eyes shrunken and dark, her features pointed, skinny to the point of almost being skeletal. She wore the robes of a nun that hung loose over her frail body. It was only when they realized that she had no feet and was gliding across the floor to them that the screaming started. The rector came running to the drawing room and discovered the children huddled together, terrified. They told the rector what they had seen and were convinced that she must have been a ghost. The rector did his best to comfort the children that there was no such thing as ghosts and sent them on their way, but something about the experience left the rector with a niggling feeling. He headed back into the drawing room to look for himself, but of course, the room was empty. Leaving the door ajar, he turned and started walking back to his office, only to hear the door slam shut as he did. And that was it. For 37 years, the rector lived a peaceful life within the walls of the Borley Rectory. But then, just days before he was due to retire, the shadows of his past came creeping back. Once again, he was working in his office when he heard the terrifying screams of a dozen children, this time from outside in the courtyard. He looked out his window to see them all sprinting away from the building in different directions. He rushed down the stairs and out the front door, managing to just grab the last couple of children as they tried to escape. Once again, just as had happened 37 years prior, the children claimed to see the spectral presence of a nun in the gardens of the rectory, and this time, she disappeared before their very eyes. The tales that swirled around the Borley nun were like tendrils of mist, at once elusive and intoxicating. She was said to appear in fleeting moments, her ethereal form framed by the cold glass of the window, a silent sentinel trapped between realms. Some whispered that she was the relentless spirit of a tragic nun who had found her final refuge within the rectory's walls, while others believed her to be a messenger from the great beyond, a harbinger of fortunes and misfortunes yet to unfold. A sense of unease settled upon those who dared to call the rectory home, gnawing at the edges of their sanity like an insatiable hunger. Shadows danced on the periphery of vision, and the boundary between reality and supernatural blurred, casting doubt upon what could be trusted. The veil between the worlds grew thin, allowing the past to bleed into the present, a merging of timelines that played out in whispers and shadows. It wasn't long before the rectory found its next occupants. Once the rector departed, Reverend Guy Smith and his wife Mabel moved in. Shortly after they moved in, Mabel was cleaning in the drawing room. She opened the old wardrobe that was located at the back of the dimly lit room and was horrified by what she discovered. There, hidden in the back of the wardrobe, was a human skull. The couple contacted the authorities at once. They were never able to identify who the skull had belonged to, but they were able to figure out that it was around 100 years old and seemingly was a skull of a young woman. It was only once this skull was taken off the property that the Smiths began to encounter the strange happenings. It seems times of upheaval, new owners, construction, sparks, whatever power is located on the site. The couple began to hear strange footsteps around the property in the middle of the night. Odd lights would be seen in windows, and most disturbingly, they claimed to see the apparition of a horse-drawn carriage moving through the courtyard. Much like the case of the Enfield haunting we covered recently, the couple contacted the newspaper The Daily Mirror in the hope of gaining interest in the case. As we've said before on the tape library, it often feels like in these circumstances, people don't know where to turn, so they try to get their story out there in the hope that someone will come to help. And it worked. The Mirror sent a reporter to the property, and that reporter brought with him a man by the name of Harry Price, one of the most famous paranormal researchers in the country, and a member for the Society for Psychical Research. Harry's research into the case was so thorough that we could likely dedicate a whole episode to his involvement at a later date. But on his first visit, he was simply there to aid the reporter, and on that short visit, the reporter was witness to a whole host of paranormal events. He reported seeing a dark, shadowy figure moving through the courtyard, but when he attempted to follow it, he could find no trace of the person. He then decided to head back to the rectory, but just as he was about to step inside, a pane of glass fell from one of the upstairs windows, just missing him. When Price and the reporter rushed upstairs to try and find where the pane had fallen from, a vase whizzed past the reporter's head, again, just narrowly missing him. The paranormal activity grew and grew over the Smiths' time in the rectory. They would only last 3 years before deciding they couldn't handle it any longer and move out. As the tale of the Borley Rectory's spectral inhabitants grew, so did the fascination with the enigma that gripped the old house. The haunting wasn't confined to mere apparitions. It extended its ethereal fingers into the realm of the living, leaving an indelible mark on the experiences of those who resided within its ominous embrace. The rectory's reputation as a den of paranormal activity reached a new zenith when Lionel and Mary Ann Foister moved into its dimly lit chambers. The Foisters would become the unwitting protagonists in the haunting, their presence awakening the dormant forces that lurked within the walls. Mary Ann, with her quiet demeanour and introspective nature, seemed particularly susceptible to the rectory's influence. She reported encounters that defied logic, an unseen hand that tugged at her clothing, disembodied whispers that echoed in the corridors, and objects that moved of their own volition. Yet it was the spirit's insatiable need for communication that sent shivers down her spine. Messages, sometimes written in archaic script, began to materialize on the walls. Lionel, once a skeptic, was gradually drawn into the web of the supernatural. He documented the experiences with a mix of fascination and unease, capturing the events as they unfolded. Objects levitated. Photographs revealed strange spectral forms, and the rectory itself seemed to be a portal to the unknown, a gateway through which the living and dead could intertwine. More so than any other residents, the Foisters, and particularly Mary Ann, seemed to experience increasingly violent activity. During the 5 years they lived there, objects were thrown by an unseen force, windows were broken, and their daughter found herself locked in a room that did not even have a lock on it. The writing that would appear on the walls appeared in multiple different handwriting styles and seemed to constantly be making references to Marianne. It has been suggested that the reason Marianne was singled out was because once again in Borley, history was repeating itself. The Reverend's wife admitted to having an affair with their lodger at the rectory, muddying the facts here further. She claimed she used the paranormal activity to help cover up her own nighttime extramarital activities. After 5 years, the family left Borley in shame. But Marianne's confession did nothing to dissuade the paranormal community, as the tendrils of the rectory's supernatural reputation continued to spread, drawing in the curious, the brave, and the incredulous. It became apparent that the Borley rectory was more than just a haunted house. It was a realm unto itself, a realm where the past and present collided in a symphony of inexplicable occurrences. This increase in activity saw the return of Harry Price, a name that would become forever entwined with the Borley Rectory saga. A controversial figure in the field of paranormal research, Price's involvement added an element of intrigue and skepticism to the unfolding drama. He arrived armed with scientific instruments and a determination to unlock the mysteries of the rectory. His investigations, while comprehensive, were met with both acclaim and criticism, as he often faced accusations of sensationalism and manipulation. In 1937, Harry Price lived in the rectory for a full year, hiring dozens of people to aid him in his extensive research into the phenomena. Price's seances within the rectory walls served as a catalyst for intensified activity. The veil between the living and the dead appeared to thin further, and the house responded with a cacophony of knocks, unexplained phenomena, and messages communicated through writings on the walls. At one point, a message, "Well," appeared on the walls of the rectory, which led Price's team to dig up an old well that lay on the grounds. Incredibly, this led to them finding human remains, supposedly the remains of a long-forgotten nun who had been left at the bottom of this well. The nun was a constant that appeared throughout the investigation, with mediums who visited the site claiming to see the nun, and one even making contact with her. The nun seemingly told the medium that the rectory would once again be destroyed by a fire. Sure enough, 1 year after Price and his team left the rectory, the newest resident of the house accidentally kicked over an oil lamp, burning the rectory to the ground. The building was then demolished as World War II came to a close in 1944. But seemingly, the activity wasn't done. The construction crew who tore it down claimed to experience a host of activity. To this day, there are reports of sightings and strange events at the former site of the rectory. The activity has seemingly also spread to the church itself, with many paranormal investigators over the years making the pilgrimage to Borley and making the church the centre of their research, with many becoming witnesses themselves to the continued presence of the nun. And this is where the Warrens come in. In the annals of paranormal investigation, few names hold the weight of Ed and Lorraine Warren. Renowned for their work in exploring the unexplained, they ventured into the heart of the Borley Rectory mystery with a blend of curiosity and caution. Their visit to the Borley Church, where remnants of the rectory's haunting still lingered, would add yet another layer of intrigue to the already mystifying history. Adjacent to the rectory's former site stood Borley Church. It was within the shadow of its ancient walls that the Warrens stepped, guided by the whispers of the supernatural. multiple visits to the church and surrounding areas over the years, dubbing it the most haunted place in Great Britain. The church, steeped in history and lore, held secrets that intertwined with those of the rectory, creating a tapestry of the unknown that Ed and Lorraine were determined to unravel. As they explored the churchyard, the Warrens were greeted by an atmosphere thick with the weight of time. Tombstones worn by centuries of weathering stood like silent sentinels, witnesses to the passages of generations and the echoes of stories long forgotten. The church's bell tower reached for the heavens, a connection between the earthly and the divine, while its time-worn pews bore the marks of countless congregations that had sought solace within its walls. Within the hollowed confines of the church, the Warrens experienced an encounter that defied their expectations. As seasoned investigators of the supernatural, they were no strangers to the eerie and the uncanny. Yet what transpired within the church's sacred space left even these seasoned veterans awestruck and humbled. Lorraine Warren, known for her psychic sensitivities, reported feeling a profound energy, an energy that she felt the moment she stepped into the church, late one night in the early 70s. The Warren son-in-law spoke in a later interview about Borley. He claimed that as soon as Lorraine entered the church, she was hit by the presence of the nun, leaving a powerful imprint on her, and with all the Warrens witnessed over the years, still shook her to her core. Ed Warren, typically a steady and pragmatic presence, described an otherworldly chill that seemed to seep into his very bones. He recounted hearing faint whispers that seemed to emanate from the air itself, whispers that carried with them echoes of bygone conversations, the laughter of children. As he stood within the church, he felt a connection, a thread that linked the present to the past, the living to the departed, and the tangible to the ethereal. But it wasn't just this encounter with the nun that inspired the character from The Conjuring, however. A few years later, Lorraine was at home reading a book when she felt a familiar presence. She looked up to see what she described as a black mass entering her room. She said it was like a vortex, blacker than night. She commanded it to leave and go back to where it came from. And seemingly, it did. Whether this was in fact the Borley nun, some other entity, or something else entirely, is something that is up for debate. Both these incidents seem to have been a key part behind the inspiration of the nun character. Ed and Lorraine's encounter with the Borley church added another layer of complexity to this already intricate tapestry of the rectory's haunting. Their experience, like those of the witnesses and investigators before them, raised questions that seemed to have no definitive answers. Did they truly commune with the spirits of the past? Were their impressions a product of their own psychic sensitivities? Or were they tapping into something greater, the collective consciousness that lingers within places steeped in history? Whatever the case may be, the Warrens left their mark on the legacy of Borley Rectory, a legacy that spans centuries and continues to captivate the curious and the courageous. Their encounter serves as a testament to the enduring allure of the supernatural, reminding us that even within the seemingly mundane, there exists a realm of the unexplained, a realm that tugs at our curiosity and beckons us to peer beyond the veil. That's all for this entry into the tape library. I hope you've enjoyed this dive into the tale of the Borley nun. If you have, please be sure to like the video and subscribe. We'll be back very soon with more terrifying tales from the darkness, so I'd love to have you join our growing community of archivists. Until next time, pleasant dreams.
It was early in 1992, and Stephen Subrick was driving alone on his way to Long Island, New York. Today was a big day, and Stephen was lost in his own thoughts. This was a life-changing morning. He was driving to his wedding. A mixture of excitement and nerves surged through his body as he got closer and closer to the venue. He was snapped out of his pleasant daydreaming state though, when he noticed a car in his rearview mirror. A twinge of recognition spread across his face. Suddenly the car behind sped up, pulling alongside Stephen. He was sure of it now. It was his older brother Gary's car. He was a little surprised to see him driving. Gary lived in Texas, and Stephen had assumed he would be flying in for the wedding, but this was the first of his family he had seen that day, and the excitement hit him yet again. Stephen smiled and waved at his brother as he kept speed alongside him. He could see his brother sitting alone in the driver's seat. He wasn't even looking at the road, just staring at Stephen. This made Stephen feel a little uneasy. And then Gary just started pulling strange faces. Stephen would never really explain what he meant by this, just strange. But regardless, he just assumed his brother was goofing around. Suddenly Gary sped up and disappeared off into the distance at an alarming rate. Stephen put it out of his mind. It was strange behaviour for his brother, but the excitement of the day had likely got to him too. Stephen enjoyed his wedding day, celebrating with friends and family alike. Later, he was alone with Gary and decided to ask him about earlier, questioning why he was messing around on the road like that, pulling stupid faces at him. Gary looked perplexed. He asked Stephen what he meant. Stephen repeated it, telling Gary that he had pulled up alongside him on the road and had been staring at him from his car. Gary just laughed, thinking Stephen was messing with him. This frustrated Stephen and he asked Gary again, what was he playing at? Was he trying to pull some sort of prank on him? It wasn't something that either of the brothers would normally do. And that's when Gary told him he never saw him before the wedding. Gary had arrived the day prior. In fact, he had flown. The car in question was sitting in his garage in San Antonio, Texas. Both brothers left the conversation with differing views about what had taken place. Gary simply assumed Stephen had seen a similar car and been mistaken. Stephen was 100% convinced he saw Gary in the car, and that his brother was just playing a strange joke on him. Neither one of them gave it much thought, until 1 year later, when a strange man would approach Gary at the airport. Welcome to the Tape Library, and if you're watching this on release day, then a happy Halloween to you all. I'm really excited to bring you this strange little story tonight. You may have heard some of the phone calls that Gary Subrick would go on to receive. They've been doing the rounds on the internet for a few years now. But I think it's all the little details surrounding the calls that make them so damn unsettling. A simple prank? An attempt at getting attention? Or is something else going on here? If your phone rings during this episode, maybe think twice about answering it. Okay, let's get into this. Get yourself a warm drink, dim the lights and get comfortable. It's time to delve into the disturbing mystery of the Subrick phone calls. Gary Subrick was a member of the Air Force in the early 1990s, working as a pharmacist at a base in San Antonio, Texas. He looked at his rota for the month of February and realised the first weekend of the month he would actually have 3 days off in a row. He was supposed to let his superiors know if he was planning to leave the area, and would be forced to use it as leave. But knowing that he was unlikely to be called in at the last minute, Gary decided to keep quiet, take the 3 days off and head to New York to visit his family. He hadn't had the chance to get back there often since his brother's wedding, and was keen to catch up with his friends as well as talk to his father about a strange experience that he had recently had. That afternoon, Gary was alone in his home, packing his bags, when he suddenly heard a loud noise from outside his apartment. Gary walked through the sliding doors out onto the balcony. He saw, just past the fence of his apartment, a helicopter hovering just 20 feet off the ground, facing Gary's property. This was unusual. Gary rushed back inside to grab his glasses so he could see the details of the helicopter better. But before he could get back, the helicopter had quickly increased its altitude. Gary made it back to his balcony just in time to see it speeding off into the distance. Gary wondered why it was there. Had it landed in the field opposite his home? He simply shrugged it off and went back to packing. Later that day, he was stood at the airport terminal. His flight to New York was beginning to board, waiting for his row to be called out, when he was approached by a slim man with brown hair and wearing an overcoat. The man said hello to Gary, and Gary politely responded. He began asking Gary where he was going, and he told him he was heading off to see friends and family in New York for a few days. He informed the man that he worked at the nearby Air Force base. Gary then noticed that the man had a small notebook in his hand. The man asked Gary's name. Gary told him. But then the man started pressing for Gary's full name. This obviously weirded him out a little. Gary was in uniform and was wearing his name badge, but his surname was covered by his jacket. It was at this point that Gary realised this wasn't just some sort of polite conversation from a man trying to pass the time. He was noting down information about Gary as they spoke. The man claimed to be starting up some sort of small business, and seemingly was conducting a survey in the airport. But Gary hadn't noticed him talking to any of the other passengers. The man then seemed to really start to push for Gary's full name. When Gary asked why he needed it, the man simply told Gary, "Don't worry, you won't get into trouble." This was enough for Gary. He wanted out of this strange interaction, and luckily his row was called at that moment. Gary grabbed his things and said goodbye to the stranger, pleased to be finally boarding his flight. Gary took his seat on the flight, and a man with long hair and glasses sat down next to him. This man also struck up a conversation with Gary. It seemed totally normal, and the pair engaged in small talk for a while. That was until another passenger came to their row, ticket in hand, telling this man that he was in the wrong seat. The man stood up to allow the other passenger to take his seat. The man then moved across the aisle and sat next to Gary on the other side. He continued asking Gary questions. Where was he going? When would he be returning to Texas? Soon a stewardess approached and told the man that he was in the wrong seat. The man stood up again. This time, instead of taking his seat, he stood by the emergency exit just one row away. The man, suddenly realising that he wouldn't be able to stay there for long, began bombarding Gary with questions. How did he spell his last name? How long would he be away? Gary refused to answer, and eventually the stewardess forced the man to take his actual seat, which was much further back on the plane. Gary didn't see the man again after that, but understandably these two interactions creeped him out. As soon as he landed, Gary made a phone call to his landlady. He was really concerned by these two interactions, and over the course of the flight he had gotten paranoid, and believed that these men were trying to get information out of him because they were planning to rob his property. He asked the landlady to keep an eye on it, before hopping into a cab and heading to his parents' place. Now, I found conflicting stories on the events that took place upon Gary's arrival in New York. We will stick with the more widely reported account first, but I will get into the apparent trip Gary initially took with his father later. There is one detail that is important to mention now, as it plays a significant part in the calls that you will hear. Gary's father and uncle had both claimed to have seen a UFO several weeks prior during a trip to West Virginia. In fact, the pair were heavily interested in the topic of UFOs, although Gary himself says that he has never seen anything. In either version of the story, the end events were much the same. During a conversation with his father that evening, Gary told him about the helicopter that had been hovering around outside his property. His father noted that it was a strange coincidence. Earlier that day, a helicopter had been hovering just over their home. Gary had decided that he would also try to catch up with his old friend Mike that weekend. So once he was settled in, he gave Mike a quick call. Mike answered the phone and sounded surprised that it was Gary calling him. "Hey, you sound better already," Mike said to Gary. A comment that confused Gary a little, but he ignored it. telling his friend he was in town. Mike chuckled, saying he knows. They had just spoken on the phone 20 minutes prior. Gary was very confused at this point. He hadn't called Mike. In fact, prior to him turning up at his parents' door, literally no one knew Gary was planning to come to New York that weekend. Mike explained to Gary that he had received a call just 20 minutes ago from someone who sounded exactly like Gary, telling him he was in town and wanted to meet up. Mike said it sounded a little weird, and like Gary had a cold and the line was crackling, but it was definitely him. There was one strange detail though.
The early cycle because I have advanced movement. Re-enter that my try the L first and then let me know in the comments and subscribe. Hi, this is Drogi. Welcome to the 16-star beginner guide I've spent countless hours on. Please subscribe now so I can keep doing free content, and follow me on Twitter. So this guide covers a beginner route made by a committee of SM64 experts. These independent specialists will also rate how necessary some of the tricks in the run are for you, like bomb clip. The final time of the run that I show is a 17:26, and the link to the raw run is in the description. If you want more information about platforms, versions, setups and so on, check out the getting started section in the description. Before we start, 3 important things about the run I use here. I won't go into exact movement detail, but additional infos and fun facts will be written on the left of the gameplay. Point 2, this guide will not teach you how to get good fast, it just provides a base for beginners to get into speedrunning SM64. The movement done in the run isn't the only correct one to copy and follow. And lastly, the run will skip a few tricks. It is meant to showcase that you can get good times without doing all the tricks, just by optimizing your movement. So yes, this is a 17:26 without even doing lucky to skip or bomb clip. So pause this video whenever necessary, but I recommend watching it till the end first to get an idea of the speedrun as a whole. So let's jump right in. Boot up your console or start your ROM. The timer starts when the game starts and not on file select. On the start screen, press start, it's the only button that works. And to select the first file, press start and A right after each other. This is called a piano roll. If you have 2 buttons that work for something, pressing them right after each other increases your chance of getting the perfect timing. This is why all top runners press A and B right after each other to roll out from a dive. If this is news to you, you might want to check out the movement guide linked in the description below before you start playing. So the idea of a 16-star run is to collect 15 stars to make the rabbit MIPS spawn so you can clip into DDD and collect the sub-star, which makes the second pause level spawn, and the remaining skips are done with backward long jumps, but we'll see about that. Because as Mario jumps out of the pipe, let's focus on the video game. For the first text boxes, piano roll over A and B to skip them smoothly. And now for the first trick, lucky to skip. I don't do it in this example run, but here's what the expert committee suggests. 10 out of 10 means a new player should do it, and 1 out of 10 means they shouldn't. Lucky to skip gets an average of 8.8 out of 10. Tabasco says everyone should try but not reset over it, which is what I agree with. A tutorial for lucky to skip can be found in the description. And there we go, we enter the castle. Press R immediately, holding neutral, so the camera pans behind Mario. After the text boxes, hold up and enter the first stage, Bob-omb's Battlefield.
What's up everybody, my name is Delicious Darren, and today I'm going to be showing you a fairly easy and consistent way to do the Lakitu skip. So let me go ahead and do it a few times to show you what it's going to look like when you get this down. Of course I'll be using an emulator and save states throughout the duration of this video. So there's one, we're going to go for 3 in a row, and then a couple more after I finish the describing the actual method. So that was 2, and finally 3. So as you can see, once you get this down, you should be able to get it pretty much 9 times to 10 times out of 10, which would be completely awesome. So let's go into the actual tutorial section of this video. First of all, we need a couple of reference points. The first reference point being this wall right here. We want to look in between these 2 indentations, and this is where we're going to be aiming for with our first 2 long jumps, as so. Just like that. So we'll long jump a couple times towards that area. Next, we want to come over here and we want to position ourselves right in between the left side of this bridge. We want to make Mario's legs in between the left side of this bridge. Likewise, when we're jumping, when we're long jumping, we want to make sure that the legs stay in between this line right here, and that will be our reference point to make sure that this Lakitu skip succeeds. So once again, this is what it looks like, and I'm going to do it a couple more times, and then we're going to explain some of the things you need to be looking out for in general that don't necessarily go with the particular tutorial section. That word is really hard for me right now for some reason. Alright, so what do we need to be looking out for? Let me get this mouse out of the way. I apologize for that. See, the reason we do this at all, the reason we're even going up here and then turning to the left, is because of the angle. We want to get a really, really good angle on this portion right here. For instance, let's go all the way back to the beginning. If we went straight ahead, this is the angle we'd be looking at. And as you can see, we can do it right here. Oh, wow. We can do it like that. But it's a lot harder, and that's mainly used for optimal speed if you're looking for a super, super fast speed run. So what we want to do is, the whole reason we're even going over here is to get a good angle for this. We want to make sure that it's as easy as possible for us while saving a decent amount of time. Another thing you may want to note, once you're up here and once you get really, really good at it, you may just want to do like a little side hop like that so that you can save just an extra millisecond of time. I would definitely not suggest it to begin with because it might throw off your positioning. Just kind of keep going with this position yourself and then jump and then angle yourself correctly to where Mario's legs are right in between the correct area. And well guys, I believe that's it. Tune in next time. I'm planning on continuing to make some Mario speedrunning tutorials just for the heck of it. And finally, let's look at Lakitu's beautiful... Oh god. Okay, wait. Let's look at Lakitu's beautiful face. Here we go, here we go. Yeah! That teleport! See you guys next time, and thank you for watching.
The initial call that Mike had received had told him that Gary had flown into a different airport than the one he had actually arrived in. Gary had no idea what was going on. All these strange events were taking place, but none of them seemed to make any sense. What was happening here? It was then that he heard a beeping on the phone, signalling that there was another call coming in. It was 10:30 at night, so Gary assumed it was something important. He told Mike he would call him back and answered the call. It didn't take more than a minute before Gary realised he needed to record what was happening on the phone. He hit record on the answering machine and captured what would be the first of a series of strange phone calls to the Subrink home that night.
Yes. I'll tell you who it is. Yeah. Do you want to speak to him? Yeah, who's this? Steven? Are you playing games with me or what? Huh? Steven, if you're playing games, I'm gonna kick your ass. So how long are you going to be back from Texas? Huh? You being impersonated by the other voice. Yeah, this is you, Steve, you idiot. You pissed me off. Jerk. I'm gonna get you on. Let's see what it says. Review. One new call out of area. Is Steven out of the area? Going to be back from Texas. Wait, say that again? You're being impersonated by the other voice. Wait, hold on. Is Steven out of the calling area or what? What do you mean you don't know? He's in Queens. I don't know who the fuck. Hello?
Hello?
Here's Gary's son, Frank there.
Who is this? Sounds like a single robot.
Hello? How long are you going to be back from Texas? What was that again, sir? Being impersonated by the other voice. Oh, be quiet now, son. Sorry, would you see that again? Hello? Being impersonated by what voice? Hello? Yeah. Hello? Yeah, hold on a second. Yeah, what is your question? I'll answer it. So how long are you going to be back from Texas? How long? Being impersonated by the other voice. Right. When am I coming back? Is that your question? Okay, there was a break. Hold on. You want to know when I'm coming back to Texas? Oh, is that your question? So how long are you going to be back from Texas? How long am I going to be back from Texas? That question doesn't make any sense. Okay. I'll be coming back eventually. I can't tell you when. You should know that question, the answer to the questions, because you seem to know more about me than I do. You know what I'm saying?
Are you an intergalactic person?
Are you a space alien?
Sounds like he hung up.
I can't believe this.
He hung up, Gary.
See if he comes back.
All right, I'll hang up.
Initially, it's clear that Gary believes this is his brother Stephen messing with him. But as the call goes on with a strange voice, it seems he grows more and more concerned. The phrasing of the words is strange. The voice seems to slow at times, almost like it's running out of steam. It's hard not to notice that the voice sounds like a recording. Phrases are repeated over and over, like someone is using a soundboard to produce the lines. It keeps asking him, so how long are you going to be back from Texas? And more disturbingly, you are being impersonated by the other voice. Gary said years later that while it felt like at times the voice was just being played to him, not responding to his words, other times it seemed more interactive, as though it actually were a person and not a recording. He quickly called Mike back, seemingly to tell him what had just happened, and to try and get more information about the call that Mike had received earlier that evening. But just 40 minutes later, the phone rang again.
What is your question? Yes, speaking. Yes. Can I answer any questions for you? Not back yet, no. let me answer. First, you tell me, where are you calling from? Yeah, why don't you tell me where you're calling from? What do you mean, who is this? You should know who it is. It's me, Gary. Wait, let me ask you this question. Where are you calling from? Okay, I'll be back. Excuse me? I can't hear too well. Yeah, there's a full moon out. That's true. Could you identify yourself? Identify yourself. Why are you calling me? Excuse me? I cannot hear too well. Hold on, let me switch phones. Okay. Okay, hold on. Now, who are you?
Keep an eye in the sky, he said. Yeah.
Okay, hold on. Say that. Repeat that again. Please repeat. Okay. Near Orion.
Oh, mackerel. Tonight or just when?
The full moon.
They told.
Repeat. Okay, repeat last word. I'm hearing static.
Tell them I like to sleep.
He hung up. Hello?
This time the voice seems even less clear. It makes references to watching the skies, and specifically
On the star select menu, you have 3 buttons to select the star: Start, A and B, so piano roll these when you enter a stage. The name of the next potential trick is Bomb Clip. The expert's opinion on Bomb Clip, 8.7 out of 10. Tego says it's one of the easier tricks to master, but for a brand new player, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that they grind it out to the point of consistency before doing runs. A tutorial is in the description. After collecting the star on the N64, Hi, this is Drogi. Welcome to my beginner tutorial on Bomb Clip. I will first show you how to do it in 4 steps, then do some troubleshooting with you, and then I will show you some useful backups and a few ways to optimize your movement for this star. Have fun! The 5 steps. Step 1. After grabbing the bomb, hold left and do a small jump. Just tap A. Step 2. Let's see what we want to do. Our next goal is to land here, a bit more back and left than the bomb. Because after we re-grab the bomb, we will get backwards momentum. So we want to grab the bomb at an angle that will push us towards the gate, in between the wall and the chain jump. To achieve this, after the first jump, once you land, you want to throw the bomb right on the jump. So press A and B right after each other. Hold A so you get a full jump and switch from left to a bit more up left on the analog stick. Step 3. The turnaround. If the first 3 steps were done correctly, you will land here a bit more back and left than the bomb, and you land a bit earlier than the bomb. That gives you some time to turn around. Make sure the stick is neutral when you land. Then do the following. Tap down right to turn, press B to grab, and press C right to get a good camera angle. Step 4, the final step already. We press C right on step 4, so now we have a good angle set up to clip through the gate. Tap down and go towards the gate, holding the stick neutral. Once you're close enough to the gate, press B to throw the bomb away, and it will push you back and you clip through the gate. And you're done. Once again, just for you in slow motion. Grab the bomb, hold straight left to a small jump and a big jump and a throw. Land up left of the bomb, turn around, grab it. Press C right and tap down, and then you just have to press B to clip. Now troubleshooting. If the bomb explodes without you grabbing it, you try to grab it too late. If the bomb is too small, you try to grab it too early. This is a chart by Ethan that shows the explosion frames. Ideally, you want to grab it on explosion frame 4. Sometimes Mario just won't clip. That means you had a bad angle with Mario, so you either messed up the camera or you didn't tap exactly down when approaching the gate. If you hit the chain jump or just go in the wrong direction after the regrab, that means your angle on the turnaround wasn't good. And that usually means that your landing position for the regrab wasn't good, and that's what led to the bad regrab angle. If the bomb flies too far, that can have 2 reasons. You either press B too late on the throw, or you didn't hold A long enough on the second jump. Now I have 3 useful backups for you. If the cam gets messed up, reset the cam. C left, C right, and your angle should be good again. If the bomb explodes, wall kick this wall and the bomb will respawn for you to try again. Now the camera and the bomb position will be different though, so only attempt this if you have some experience in bomb clip already. Or, if the bomb explodes, you might as well just ground pound the pole. It won't lose too much over attempting another bomb clip, especially if you fail that, and it's much easier. And for you who got the bomb clip down, I have 3 optimizations. 1. If you're running and you press B when the stick is neutral, Mario will punch. So you can grab the bomb at full speed as long as you hold the stick neutral while punching. 2. Do a neutral jump and only while in air, hold towards the gate. That will accelerate Mario a bit. 3. I like to press C left on the clip. That way I can see where I stand in relation to the star, and if the position is good, I can do a backflip instead of a single jump, and that consistently saves a few frames. I hope this video helped you. If it did, please let me know in the comments. Right on the jump, so press A and B. Next goal is to left and do a small. Have fun. The 5 steps. Step 1. After grabbing the bomb, hold left and do a small jump. A small jump, just tap A. Step 2. Let's see what we want to do. Our next goal is to land here, a bit more back and left than the bomb. Because after we re-grab the bomb, we will get backwards momentum. So we want to grab the bomb at an angle that will push us towards the gate, in between the wall and the chain jump. To achieve this, after the first jump, once you land, you want to throw the bomb right on the jump. So press A and B right after each other. Hold A so you get a full jump and switch from left to a bit more up left on the analog stick. Step 3. The turnaround. If the first 3 steps were done correctly, you will land here a bit more back and left than the bomb, and you land a bit earlier than the bomb. That gives you some time to turn around. Make sure the stick is neutral when you land. Then do the following. Tap down right to turn, press B to grab, and press C right to get a good camera angle. Step 4, the final step already. We press C right on step 4, so now we have a good angle set up to clip through the gate. Tap down and go towards the gate, holding the stick neutral. Once you're close enough to the gate, press B to throw the bomb away, and it will push you back and you clip through the gate. And you're done. Once again, just for you in slow motion. Grab the bomb, hold straight left to a small jump and a big jump and a throw. Land up left of the bomb, turn around, grab it. Press C right and tap down, and then you just have to press B to clip. Now troubleshooting.
Orion. This obviously sparks the interest of Gary's UFO-obsessed father, who seems to quickly become convinced this isn't actually about Gary at all, and is maybe linked to his prior experience with seeing something in the skies above West Virginia. At 11:38 PM, a third phone call was received.
Okay. Yeah, it's taking time from the talk. Who is this? Stephen, this is not funny, you know.
Brian, it's not Steven.
What do you mean, Brian?
I mean, Gary.
How do I know it's not Stephen?
It's not Steven. Hello? I had a UFO experience in West Virginia, which you probably know. And I know that you're into an intergalactic person. Can you speak a little louder? Sir? Can you speak a little louder? Louder?
Let me speak to him, Dad. I guess I don't know.
All right, I'll hang up so you can talk to me. He wants to talk to you.
Okay. Hello, can I help you? Yes. Yes, that's me. Yes, could you please identify yourself? Identify. Yeah, I'm back. I'm in Texas right now. Oh, he asked me a question. No, I'm in New York right now. You know that. Why do you ask me such a question?
For an emulator, on the how to continue menu, you want to practice hitting the bottom option. Don't save and continue. That saves a few lag frames every time you do it. Now that we have 1 star, we have enough to unlock the next door leading to the next stage, which is Womp's Fortress. We start out with cannonless. I do the setup, the experts say you should do as well. 9.8 out of 10. I agree with Simply, who simply says easy to learn. A tutorial with a troubleshooting part is in the description below. Hello, this is Drogi, and today we're going to learn and understand how to do cannonless. How it works. Basically, on this wall that you're supposed to break using the cannon, you can ledge grab in this spot. There's a few pixels on the wall where you can ledge grab. For 1 frame, the game tries to make you ledge grab and moves the hitbox of Mario a tiny bit inside the wall, just enough to make it overlap with the star's hitbox, allowing Mario to collect the star in a very unintended way. The player who most probably discovered cannonless was Foda in 2006. Silent Slayers was the first person to do it non-TAS in January 2007. From now on, people would do the so-called OG cannonless in speedruns, where you run off the platform and just hope you grab the stars somehow. 7 years later, Sockfolder revolutionized SM64 by programming a bot that more or less randomly tries out various setups. Eventually, it really did find a way to get cannonless or sealless consistently. The same day, a lot of Mario legends messed around with the new setup. DevTech eventually came up with a ledge grab setup that's way faster than Sockfolder's. I will teach you that setup now. If you were to follow Sockfolder's instructions, you would ledge grab right here, next to the plank. DevTech, however, found out that if you stand here, somewhere next to the plank, you could do neutral jumps. Then, while midair, you slightly tap the stick to the left so the plank sort of pushes you back next to it. This is called the plank push setup, and it is very reliable. Now the important part, which is super easy though if you know what to do. Get up by pressing A. Perform a backflip by holding C, then pressing A. C left twice and punch by pressing B. Then walk down very slightly until you ledge grab. Then you're in the perfect position to grab the star, but first you want to reset the camera to increase the setup's consistency by a lot. You want to do that by pressing C right first and then C left and C up at the same time. The C up reduces some lag on the fade out animation, and that was found by Kaiman. This is the final part. You want to get up with a slow ledge grab. Cannonless will not work if you ledge grab by pressing A. You do a slow get up by tapping the stick up left. I stopped the video now that Mario is in a slow get up animation. During that animation you can start holding down, and this will lead you right into the star. Now some troubleshooting. If sealless doesn't work for you and you don't know why, check these points.
Yes. Steven, if this is you, I swear to God, I'm gonna be pissed. Huh? I'm trying to listen to him. Excuse me? Okay. Eventually I'll be back from Texas. Could you speak more? Please speak more. I guess it's not Steven. I believe it's because I get static. Let me go on this phone, because I can never hear on this phone. Hold on. Okay. Okay, please speak. Hello? Okay. Should I go out right now? Right now? Okay, see, I'm not sure where Orion is now, but we'll go outside. It would show double from me. Repeat that again?
Gary still seems to be running with the thought that this is Steven messing with him, although at this point I think he is merely saying this to save face, if it does turn out to be a prank. I think he sounds more audibly shaken as each call comes in. By this point parts of the voice are barely audible. The family were using two phones, with Gary's dad listening in on the other line. This would be the last contact the family would have that night. Gary went to bed, confused and a little scared, unsure who it was that was calling him, and what connection it had, if any, to the men at the airport. He also questioned would this person have even contacted him, if Mike hadn't revealed to him about the fake Gary phoning him. The call came right after discovering this information, almost as though the person was listening to his conversation with Mike. The following day passed without event, until 10:21 PM. The quiet night was punctuated by the shrill ringing of the phone once again.
Yes, this is me. why you're... Yes, can I ask why you're calling? Can I please ask... Yes, this is. Yes, that is me. Say that again? Leave? I'm staying right here. Is this a joke or what? I have to think about that. I'd like to see you.
Hey, let me tell you something. I've been listening to you, and I've had contacts with you.
Government interference? You have? Please explain what type of interference. Okay.
Sun will rise from the dark side of the moon.
Okay, what branch of the government? What should I do? Okay. Is that good for me or bad? They hung up.
Yeah.
With the exception of the now familiar question of, is Gary Subrink there? The rest of the comments made by the voice on this call seem to be different from the previous ones. It talks about government interference, about the fact that it came to be within the planet, as well as more references to the moon. None of the comments fully make sense on their own, but it seems impossible not to connect them to Gary's family's strong belief in UFOs. If this is a person pranking them, that person knew a lot about them, and knew how to play on their fears extremely well. This would be the last time the voice would contact any of the Subrink family. Gary would never see the men he met at the airport again, and seemingly nothing had happened to his apartment while he was away. Gary would only ever speak about the events to a handful of other people, but his interest in subjects like UFOs only grew after the events of February 1993. Gary has said that while he has not had an experience like that again, he has experienced other strange events, some that he would describe as poltergeist-like activity, although to my knowledge he has never spoken about this at length. I mentioned early on that there are two different versions of the story out there about what Gary did after arriving in New York. The most commonly reported version is he got to his parents' place, and phoned Mike almost straight away after arriving. But another version seems to exist that suggests that Gary had arrived in New York and then gone with his father to meet a prominent expert in the UFO field about the experience he had in West Virginia. The call had happened just a couple of hours after arriving back home from that conversation, which, if true, maybe gives more reason why Gary's father jumped straight into the thought that the voice he was speaking to wasn't human, although I am unsure which version of events is the real one. Several weeks before, Gary's father and uncle had decided to travel to West Virginia to visit the Green Bank telescope. The giant telescope had collapsed back in 1988, and rumours at the time had spread that it had been attacked by a UFO. Ever since, the telescope has been a favourite haunt for UFO hunters. The older Subrinks had gone there one evening and claimed that they did in fact see an unidentified flying object hovering over the observatory. Interestingly, the observatory would later become a key part of the Breakthrough Listen project, and has been used to try and scan for radio signals that may suggest the existence of alien life. It also has been instrumental in a number of discoveries, including a large coil-shaped magnetic field and a gas bubble, both around Orion. So what really happened? Let's talk about the obvious first. The voice is almost certainly a tape recording, not some kind of robot. It appears someone is playing their voice through a tape recorder and slowing it down during the phone call. It's worth noting that just months prior, Home Alone 2 had come out, and with it came the release of the...
If you skip the plank push, make sure that your position on the ledge grab is not too far right and not too far left. This is a chart by Pannenkoek 2012 that shows which ledge grab positions work and which don't. You sort of have to get a feeling for it by practicing it over and over. When you punch, wait for the punch to be fully ended when you start holding down. If you hold down too early, you might get a so-called punch cancel, which influences your ledge grab position in a bad way. What you also want to pay attention to is that you're really holding straight down. This is one of the most common mistakes I see around, and even if you really feel like you're holding straight down, that's not always the case. On notchless controllers or when switching controllers, this can be quite tricky. If you want to go fast by skipping the plank push, you can do a well-placed single jump into the ledge grab. Another way to go a bit faster is when you do the camera reset during the get up animation. This can be a bit tricky, but it's not too hard if you get the muscle memory down. If you see top runners, you might see them skip the ledge grab entirely. This is called the texture setup, where they rely on certain textures and everybody has a different visual cue on where to actually ledge grab. For me, it's lining up Mario's left foot with this line and the texture of the plank. That usually works for me. When you ledge grab, you want to make sure that this line is straight and that you cannot see this wall. If you can just barely not see that wall, that means your ledge grab position is very good. If you realize you're a bit too far left, you can try to press R when falling down. This is the Taba vision, named after Taba Scott, but it doesn't always work, it's just a very useful backup. I hope this tutorial helped you. If you have any more questions, don't hesitate to contact me on Twitter or Discord.
Don't save and continue and re-enter Wom's Fortress. Long jump into the tree and go collect the wild blue star. To avoid grabbing the pole at the end, grab the star with a slide kick by pressing Z and B.
Most popular Christmas gift of the time, the Talk Boy. In the movie, the device is used to fake voices numerous times by slowing down recorded voices.
It even has speed control.
Hi kids, we're home early.
Hi kids, we're home early.
And many have pointed out that the talk boy could be being used here. In recent years, people have sped up the recordings, and sure enough, you get what sounds like a regular person's voice.
You are being impersonated by the other voice.
Some have suggested that the voice sounds a lot like Gary, but I personally don't think they sound that alike myself. Obviously, it is difficult to be 100% sure though with the recording quality, and there is a whirring sound that can be heard at times on the calls. That could be the tape being rewound and fast forwarded. This has led many people to call the entire thing either a hoax on the part of the subrinks, or a simple prank call. Both of those are very likely outcomes here. But Gary takes issue with the talk boy theory. He states that while interesting, it completely ignores all the other strange events around his visit. The peculiar men at the airport and on the plane, the fake Gary calling Mike, and even Steven spotting someone who resembled Gary en route to the wedding the year prior. It's hard not to connect that event when you hear the words, "You are being impersonated by the other voice." No one knew Gary was coming to New York, so who could have planned out this strange prank? And if the men at the airport were not connected at all, it was a weird event that unexpectedly gave the prankster a Gary that was already on edge. Seemingly, no one has come forward to Gary to claim responsibility for the prank either. There is of course the idea that Gary just faked the conversations and made the whole story up. But you have to question why he would do this. Gary does not appear to have contacted many people to talk about the topic. He never wrote a book or did interviews. For the most part, no one knew about this incident until Gary approached a woman named Sue Swiatek, who had given a talk about the Men in Black at a UFO conference Gary attended. Gary handed Sue a CD and told her to listen to it. On the CD was the recordings he had made back in 1993.
Re-enter once again and make your way up to the king. You want to try to reach the last platform as quickly as possible. There are many ways to get up here, but a side flip wall kick dive onto the island is suitable for beginners. You can clip through King Womp during your ground pound animation and ground pound right on top of him. You do that once, twice, and one more third time. And if you have some experience, you can also place Mario so that he lands directly in the start.
She would later tell Gary's story at another conference in 2006, which as far as I could tell was the main source for Gary's story, even being present on the internet, along with an article for the website Normal Paranormal, meaning for over a decade he had just sat on those recordings without going public. Gary certainly isn't the first person to have received calls like this. Plenty of stories exist, such as the accounts of Preston Dennett, who claimed to receive phone calls like this back in the 1950s. And as Gary himself points out, John Keel claims to have received similar calls during his investigation into the Mothman case, although in that event, some claim that the calls Keel received were actually just drunken phone calls from fellow investigator, Gray Barker. The reason for Gary approaching Sue Swiatek all those years later seemingly was due to her sharing stories of encounters with the fabled Men in Black. Some theorise that the Men in Black are government agents, used to discourage people from speaking about encounters with UFOs, but others believe they are something else. Those who have spoken about them have often stated they talk with a weird syntax, and at times sound almost like they are running out of energy to communicate, normally leading to them abruptly leaving as their speech becomes slow and slurred, much like those phone calls the subrinks received that night. While it seems they never experienced anything like it again, there is a brief account that Gary has mentioned in an interview he gave to the podcast Mysterious Brews just a few years ago. He says that in 2001 his mother was receiving cancer treatment. While speaking with the doctors at the hospital one day, they mentioned that Gary's sister had called up to ask about her mother's results. What was strange about that is that Gary only had 2 brothers. A simple mistake, right? The doctor has simply mixed up his patients. But what if it wasn't just a coincidence? And there is someone, or something, still out there pretending to be a submarine. That's all for this entry into the tape library. I've wanted to do this one for a few months now, and I just thought those phone calls had such a creepy uncanniness to them that they made for some perfect Halloween listening. As always, please do let me know what you think of this case. Was it just a prank and a series of strange coincidences? A totally made up story by Gary and his family? Or is there something more to it? Let me know in the comments below. We're on the home stretch for 2024, a year which has seen the tape library go from getting a couple of thousand views each month to well over 1 million of you crazy people tuning in every month, which just continues to be mind-boggling to me. So we're going to try and bring the year to an end in a really strong way, but I'll get into those topics at another time. So if you don't want to miss out, make sure you subscribe. On another note, I'm trying to be a little more active on social media, so if you all want more ways to interact with me, it's well worth searching out the tape library on Facebook and Instagram. That means there's nothing left to do but thank our wonderful supporters who keep the tape library going. The tape library archivists: Umiko Grimm, Tracy Torello, Sandy Lusk, Restock1731, Mirror, Judith Hacker, Gabrielle, Eric Salas, Destiny M, Ashlaf Books, Alex O'Neill, Adeline, Peter McCann, Georgia Harvey, Callie Diego, Deppy Johnny, Dominic DeAngelis, DJ Daly, 1000th Ghost, London Grace, Melissa Harrison, Simon Ulaz, Callie Cott, Megan Redding, Alfredo Sandoval, Darla, and of course Queen of Flatulence. The lead archivist: Vaniel, Brian Barker, Old Soul Like Mine, Lord William, Xavier Angle, Tyler Michael, Rick Diculous, I swear you're all doing this on purpose now, and Alex Goldberg. And our grand overseers: Forever, Morning Rain 2619, Katie, Agent 355, Brock Hampton, and Grim Reaper KL. Thank you all so much for your continued support, and to all my junior archivists and YouTube members as well. Your contributions make a massive difference to this channel. Until next time, pleasant dreams.
In this compilation,
The next star is the Tower Star. The tower causes a lot of lag on the N64, which is why I press C up here. Get onto the island again, long jump over, get onto this platform and side flip wall kick your way up to tower.
video, I invite you to revisit some of the cases of demonic possession and exorcism featured on my channel in 2025. My name is Laura, and you are watching The Paranormal Scholar. Ralph Sarchi had been called to the pretty suburban home of the Mackenzie family, a self-proclaimed religious demonologist who had been mentored by Ed and Lorraine Warren, who was there to perform an exorcism. Also a New York City police sergeant, Sarchi was used to living in two worlds, one of cop life, down and dirty in the streets with very real blood and guts, and one plagued by a different sort of crime. The different sort of crime was, as Sarchi explained in his 2001 autobiographical book Deliver Us from Evil, perpetuated by forces that are evil beyond imagination. In short, the demonic. The case of the Mackenzie family was, so it seemed, no different. a house of women who, after suffering the loss of the head of the family, had endured grotesque horrors, specifically the unceasing attention of a preternatural incubus for the past 6 years. I'm here to help as best I can, Saatchi had told Monique Mackenzie, the 17-year-old oldest daughter of the family, when she greeted him at the door. Her eyes, so Saatchi explained, were haunted.
Now we call for the experts again, Owlless. In the video I take the owl. The committee suggests doing the same, 4.1 out of 10. Puncation says, with beginner movement it doesn't even save time and it's not worth it if you just fall once. I agree, Owlless shouldn't be done in runs if you're a beginner, but it can't hurt to try and practice it for a bit. The tutorial is in the description below. Now that we have 6 stars, we want to go over to Cuckoo Mountain to collect 2 more stars so we have enough to enter the first Bowser stage to get the first key so that we can get into the basement as soon as possible. We want to get into the basement as soon as possible because the stars there are really fast compared to some of the lobby stars. Here, after the door, long jump immediately to gain another long jump to hop right into the painting. Next star, Penguin Baby. Get it in the description below.
A few hours later, when standing in the family's kitchen, the moonlighting demonologist got to understand why. Facing the house's glass patio doors, a sudden movement caught his eye. It was a shapeless black mass that glided from right to left before disappearing into a wall. Terrifyingly, it appeared to be inside the room, the darkness of the nighttime having transformed the patio doors into black glass mirrors that had presented the reflection. True to his police training, Saatchi had immediately gone outside to look for an intruder. There was none. The shape had been inside the kitchen. Shapeless, ethereal, not human. None of the family had said a word to the police sergeant, despite having seen the apparition also. They didn't need to. Their faces told Saatchi everything. There you go. Now you believe us. This was the foul spirit that they had been tormented by for the past 6 years. A spirit that had frightened them, stolen their dignity, and even at times taken their very bodies from them. My name is Nora, and you are watching The Paranormal Scholar. By the time Saatchi found himself in suburban Washington, D.C., at the home of the Mackenzies, the family had already spoken about their experiences on Sightings, an American television show that reports on real-life cases of paranormal activity. According to Saatchi, their testimonies had been compelling, with what they were describing leading him to believe that they were being oppressed by demons. A few months later, during a phone call with Ed Warren, Saatchi was invited to join the Warrens on a visit to the family's home. They were desperate and had reached out for help. It all began, so Claudia, the mother of the family, explained, the first Christmas after her husband had died. Tragically, just 3 days after moving into their new home, he had been diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer, passing away just a month later. Facing their first Christmas without...
Now that we have 6 stars, we want to go over to Cuckoo Mountain to collect 2 more stars so we have enough to enter the first Bowser stage to get the first key so that we can get into the basement as soon as possible. We want to get into the basement as soon as possible because the stars there are really fast compared to some of the lobby stars. Here, after the door, long jump immediately to gain another long jump to hop right into the painting. Next star, Penguin Baby. Get up here with a triple jump or a side flip. Grab the penguin and start sliding down on the right. I suggest learning that in Mario Kart. It saves lag and it's a bit easier to slide fast. As you reach the Mama Penguin, leave the Mario Camp, and with a well-placed single jump, you can grab the star.
Their eldest daughter, Monique, had experienced the sound of 3 violent thumps on her night table. These were followed by a series of rhythmic raps. None appeared to have a cause. They had been manifested into sound by unseen hands. Urgent and aggressive unseen hands. At first, the then young girl thought someone had broken into the house. Fearing for her life, she was too afraid to open her eyes. It was then, lying in her bed alone and scared, that she heard and felt something breathing heavily on her ear. When it spoke, its voice sounded raspy and decrepit, as though she explained during her recorded interview with the Warrens. It was thousands of years old. It told her that it wanted to have sex with her. Absolutely terrified, the girl rushed to her mother's bedroom. At first, Claudia did not believe her child. After all, it was so strange and unsettling. Instead, she had assumed her bereaved daughter had suffered a nightmare. She calmed her down and sent her back to bed. And that was the end of it, until the following winter. This time, it was the mother, Claudia, who experienced something inexplicable. She was alone in her bedroom, her new boyfriend Artie away at the time, when she heard something enter the room. Similar to Monique's experience, she felt it breathing loudly in her ear. Then she experienced the sensation of falling. She was paralyzed with terror. There was, so she explained, pure evil in the room with her. Desperate to get to her children, which included Monique and her two twin daughters, Caroline and Marybeth, Claudia remembered getting out of bed. Whatever happened next, however, was bizarre. She saw her children flickering on the walls as if they were floating. When she tried to speak to them, no sound left her mouth. All around her, the furniture appeared wavy and transparent. A desperate attempt to reach the phone to call her mother for help resulted in Claudia hearing the voice of her deceased husband. She cried to him for help, after which she awoke back in bed. And so, just another nightmare. Or was it? As the months continued, so did the eerie experiences in the house. Cruel and confusing, the family would hear strange cries, including on one horrifying occasion coming from a plastic baby doll. It wasn't the kind of doll that cries, just a regular plastic doll. Sensationally, it was even said to have had real tears in its eyes. Then, one day, after returning home from a church service, the activity intensified. According to Claudia, she, her friend Jamie, and one of the twins, Marybeth, were physically attacked while saying additional prayers in the house. Horrifically, Marybeth felt a burning sensation on her stomach, as if she had just been scratched. When she raised her shaft to look, she and her mother saw that the girl's body had been clawed from hip bone to hip bone. It was a wide red line that was welting up. Shocked and uncertain as to what to do, the trio resumed their praying. And yet, the more they called for protection from the divine, the worse the activity became. Marybeth is said to have let out a loud yelp of pain as 3 side-by-side scratches appeared on her cheek. Eerily, the number 3.
Coming up, the last lobby star. Jump kick your way down here. Timing the kick takes some practice so you can land on the platform without getting fall damage. Keep on running and side flip on the next platform and, with a few well-placed wall kicks, you can grab the star quite quickly. Now let's move on to the first Bowser stage.
Is often associated with the demonic as an inversion of the Trinity, a sacred symbolism that is so ancient that it predates Christian culture. Ralph Sarchi describes the inversion of the number 3 as the calling card of the demonic. And so by now the family suspected preternatural interference. What they were experiencing was not just an ordinary spirit haunting, but the work of a demon. Appeal to the religious only seemed to inflame the activity, with physical assaults being visible on their bodies. Indeed, even the family friend Jamie is said to have been scarred by the incident. According to Claudia's testimony, we all heard growls and saw red marks appear on her face, her forearms and her chest. Before too long, the kids looked like battered children, and Claudia was left with a difficult choice to make: to stay or leave. And yet, leaving the house proved to be pointless. A brief stay at Claudia's brother's home left them feeling utterly disheartened. The children were continually attacked. On one occasion, so the mother alleged, she witnessed her daughter receive a demonic scratch right in front of her. The vicious, burning wound appeared on Mary Beth's face, being so brutal that the result was she had both tears and blood streaming down her ravaged face. It was upon their return home that the phenomena is said to have increased again, having transformed from the audible knocks and bangs to the physical scratches and burns. It changed once more to the sexual. Heinously, every female in the house, excluding 13-year-old Caroline, claimed to have experienced nighttime molestation on more than one occasion. Even Jessica, Claudia's 15-year-old niece who lived with the family for some of the hauntings' duration, was not spared. Even sleeping in pairs did not alleviate the assaults, with Ralph Sarchi and the Warrens compiling horrific testimonies in which the women and girls were suffocated and thrown about the room by the hellish predator. In one particularly graphic testimony, 17-year-old Monique described being woken by the sound of a sledgehammer banging the walls and floors. When she looked to the end of the bed, she saw the outline of a man. She then proceeded to explain how the dark apparition flopped forward on top of her, after which she felt it enter her body. In the young woman's own words, "It hurt really bad, like I was being ripped open." Beyond abhorrent sexual attacks, the entity in the house seemed to be encouraging violence between members of the household. It would, so the girls explained, put evil and obscene thoughts into their minds. During her interview, Monique candidly confessed to getting strange urges to pick up a bottle or knife and attack her mother, sisters and cousin. Jessica, the girl's cousin, experienced something similar. "My hand kept moving from side to side against my will," she explained to both Ralph Sarchi and the Warrens.
We skip the rec coins for now, as they might be risky for beginners, but they are amazing to practice your movement. As you get better, you will replace a different star with Dogwell Dreads, so you can just practice them now for later. Climb the stage as fast as possible. You can chain long jumps or dives, but make sure that you don't run up there. Long jumping on these platforms is a quite safe method for beginners, I'd say. And this little rim has more space for you to long jump on than you'd think. Some wall kicks and a triple jump dive. Enter the pipe and get ready for the first Bowser fight. Skip the text boxes and run around his tail to
My hands felt like they had claws, and I wanted to scratch someone. From the Mackenzie family's testimonies, it seems to have been the case that they had to fight on a daily basis, fight to resist succumbing to the darkness and allowing whatever perverted preternatural beings stalk the shadows of their home even greater access to their bodies, minds and souls. In folklore, the incubus is a male demon that assumes human form in order to have sexual intercourse with sleeping women. The counterpart to the feminine succubus, union with incubi was historically associated with the birth of malevolent witches, demons, and human-demon hybrids known as changelings or cambion. Deterioration in the mental and physical state of the female victim is also linked to incubi activity. After all, the traditional purpose of the incubus was not merely to invert the sacred and creative union of man and woman in the begetting of monstrous offspring, but also to drain vital life force from the woman. Eerily, the incubus is encountered in various guises all around the world, similar nighttime assailant being found in ancient Mesopotamia. Here, the Lilu is a classification of demon or spirit believed to disturb or seduce women in their sleep in order to produce offspring. Elsewhere, incubi-type spirits are known as Trauco in Chile, Alp in Germany, Karabasan in Turkey, and Pisadira in Brazil. Despite the cultural variations, these entities share strikingly consistent traits. They attack during the night, immobilize their victims, and induce sensations of suffocation, paralysis, or unwanted sexual contact. To some, the cross-cultural persistence of such stories suggests that, rather than be a real supernatural entity, the incubus instead represents a deeply rooted human attempt to rationalize episodes of sleep paralysis, night terrors, or other sleep-related disturbances long before the advent of medical explanation. In this way, modern medical science has attempted to explain away this universal phenomenon, pointing primarily to normal states of consciousness experienced when either in a hypnagogic or hypnopompic state, i.e., when we move from wakefulness to sleep, or inversely, sleep to wakefulness. In short, that incubus and succubus encounters are hallucinations. After all, typical phenomena associated with an incubus-type entity include the feeling of being crushed or suffocated, electric tingles or vibrations, discarnate speech.
Grab it as quickly as possible and spin your stick clockwise. So some of the basement stars can get quite tricky, so you want to put enough time into practicing them. After the key door, don't wall kick or anything, just long jump and turn right to do a dive. Try to get to SSL as quickly as possible without doing AB kicks. These are slower, I put a video explaining them in the description. So the first star in SSL is the Klepto star. Dive over the first hill and run up on the front side of this pillar. Make sure to run up rather right than left. This manipulates the fly guy so it is less likely to mess up this long jump. It takes some practice to land it on the fly guy, and when you do, Mario will be launched into the air. You can fly much further by holding A mid-air, but it is slower, so you want to release it as early as possible. Switch to Mario Cam, see down right as you land, so you can kick and long jump, and see the star when sliding down. The timing of the final jump is not precise at all, don't worry. After
the vivid presence of a visible or invisible entity, and sometimes intense emotions such as fear, euphoria, and even orgasmic feeling. All of this is consistent with hallucinatory experiences. And yet, what is striking about the case of the Mackenzies is the consistency with which the specific attacking entity is physically described. Indeed, according to the testimonies contained in Ralph Sarchi's book, whenever various members of the family caught sight of the demon that was terrorizing them, they described it in similar terms. Indeed, even Artie, the boyfriend, the only male in the household, is claimed to have witnessed it. He told Sarchi it was a monster. "There ain't nothing else I can call it," he explained. It had rough fur sticking up all over its body and was hunkered down like it was hiding. After he saw it, the horrific creature vanished. A few months later, he encountered the being again. On that occasion, it assumed the form of a shadow man. It moved along the floor beside him, an unnatural mimic, deliberately keeping step with him. When the females in the house offered their testimony, shared separately and one at a time with the Warrens, they too described the incubus as being hairy and huge. According to Claudia, it looked like a beast with short black fur. To Marybeth, it was a demonic Bigfoot. And so there was some level of consistency, both in terms of the sighting descriptions and the atrocities experienced. After reaching out for help, first via the Sightings television show and later directly to Ed and Lorraine Warren and ultimately Ralph Sarchi, the Mackenzie family came to uncover a possible reason for their suffering. The house, which they called home, was rumoured to guard a dark history. According to the account contained within Sarchi's Deliver Us from Evil book, another policeman had told the Mackenzies that the previous owner of the house was a Satanist. His subsequent story was pure evil, with many of the details too vile to repeat here. Suffice to say, the previous owner was accused of having performed dark rituals defined by the worst sort of abuse. His 2 young children were victimized, as were animals and ultimately, if the shocking story is to be believed, an infant. All of this, the Mackenzies were told, took place in their home, specifically their basement laundry room. According to Sarchi, when he first walked around the house, this was the room in which he experienced an atmosphere of menace. Unlike the rest of the clean and spacious family home, the laundry room was gripped by an overpowering dread. There was no obvious reason for the feeling, only, so it is said, a secret, sinister past. Despite having reached out to both a Baptist minister and a Catholic priest for help, Claudia Mackenzie had been utterly abandoned. Now, the three people in her home, the controversial investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren, and an NYPD cop come demonologist, were her only hope. And so it was, after spending 10 hours in the house, the longest he had ever done so on a case before, Saatchi conducted an exorcism. Working solo, moving from room to room, he showered everything with holy water as he read the Pope Leo prayer, his relic of the True Cross in hand. All the while, the nervous family were watched over by Ed and Lorraine Warren in a safe room. Fortunately, the exorcism was largely uneventful. Saatchi believes that his faith kept him safe. He felt connected to the divine, and guided by the work of exorcists like Father Malachi Martin, he felt confident in his ability. And so, around midnight, he departed the house, bidding good night to both the Mackenzies and the Warrens. A year later, he heard from Ed that Claudia had reached back out. Not to say that the activity was ongoing, but rather, since the night of the exorcism, she, her daughters, and niece had been free of the demonic oppressor. It was done, finally over after 6 years of hell. As Saatchi concluded in his book, I was delighted that they could finally live in peace, but knew that somewhere out there is an extremely angry demon who hates love and loves to hate. After all, the reality of the demonic is that we exist in a state of spiritual warfare. There is no such place as a way. You are not banishing a demon to some void space, but simply moving it elsewhere. It is manifest and cannot be not so. Thus, in the words of Ralph Saatchi, it doesn't matter if you believe or not. It doesn't withdraw you from this battle. You are involved in it. Demonic possession is rare. So rare, in fact, that these are the words of a man who dedicated 4 decades of his life to battling demons and other paranormal entities. Canon William H. Landrum was a well-respected Anglican priest from Belfast who specialised in ministering to those troubled by the paranormal. Over the course of his ministry, he imparted countless blessings, confronted poltergeists, drove away earthbound spirits, and performed exorcisms in order to deliver demoniacs. These latter instances were described by Landrum during an interview with authors David N. Keeley and Christina McKenna as the exception rather than the rule. In most cases of paranormal disturbance, a lesser cause and thus a lesser solution was the outcome. The story of Heather Mitchelson was an exception. Plagued by darkness her entire life, it was in the winter of 1992 that activity escalated. Strange phenomena arrived at Heather's home, as well as voices that told her to do unspeakable things. Fleeing the property did not resolve the issue. The activity followed her, with Heather's very body ultimately succumbing to demonic influence. Her voice is said to have changed, as well as her face, her language, and her demeanour. By the time Canon Landrum became involved, he concluded that she was fully possessed by multiple preternatural entities. Again, her story was an exception rather than the rule. And unlike others I have covered on this channel, not all stories of demonic possession and exorcism find a happy ending. And so, in the dark and tragic case of Heather Mitchelson, viewer discretion is advised. My name is Laura, and you are watching The Paranormal Scholar. From the moment of her birth, Heather's life had been surrounded by evil. Her father was violently abusive. Her mother, traumatized, was sporadically absent for her formative early years. Even when things seemed to change for the better, after the sudden death of her father and restoration of her mother to her life, Heather's situation didn't improve. Rather, she acquired a new dark influence in her life, a stepdad who, in many ways, was even worse than her blood father. The abuse he committed against her was utterly unspeakable. And according to Canon Lendron's retelling of the case in The Dark Sacrament, a 2007 book by authors David M. Keeley and Christina McKenna, was actually permitted and approved of by Heather's mother. The one person who seemed to have exerted any sort of positive influence on a young Heather was her maternal grandmother, affectionately known as Nan Sell. Heather and her brother spent 5 years living with her whilst her mother was away working in England. A strong bond was formed between granddaughter and grandmother, so much so that even 14 years after her death in 1978, Heather was at first pleased to see her Nan Sell again when she appeared as a ghostly figure at the end of her bed at 3 in the morning in late February 1992. Her initial gladness at seeing her grandmother, however, soon dissipated. Confronted by the spectral anomaly, Heather asked aloud, "What do you want?" She was surprised to receive an answer. Dressed in a pale blue nightgown, the spirit of the older woman responded in a chilling voice, "Heather, soon you'll be with me." After this, the spirit supposedly raised its hands to its throat and made strangling motions. Undoubtedly, Heather was terrified. Despite having endured a tragic start to life, she had for the past 2 years been living happily with a kind and loving man called Joe. She was settled and peaceful and did not want anything to jeopardize that. And yet, after she called her mother, frantically needing to share the story of her spectral grandmother, she began to spiral. Her mother was cold and ridiculed her experience, despite confirming that Nan Sell had indeed been buried in a pale blue nightgown, something which Heather, only being 10 years old at the time of her grandmother's passing, had not known. And so, alone at home, with Joe away working the night shift, Heather's thoughts quickly darkened. Previously, she had made 2 attempts to end her life. Her mind returned there now. But more than that, she was encouraged by something that seemed to exist outside of her. A voice, a man's voice. It was coming from somewhere down the hall and instructed her in horrific detail to go to the bathroom and take unspeakable action. She was certain that the voice was that of her abusive stepfather, who she had called Uncle Seth. The more it spoke to her, the more hypnotic it became. An eerie sense of calm is said to have enveloped her entire body. Fortunately, before she was able to do anything, another voice, that of a different man, roused her. It was her boyfriend, Joe, returned from work. Later, Joe confessed to Canon Lendron that he had been petrified at that moment. He had never seen Heather like that before. Her eyes were wide and staring. She seemed in some kind of trance. Indeed, at first, Heather had not even recognized him. In the end, a gentle touch on the arm and soft, persistent calling of her name had restored her awareness. Despite the intensity of the situation, both Heather and Joe, once calmed down, had dismissed the incident as an anomaly, brought on by stress, sleep disturbance.
This tricky star, you're rewarded with the fastest in-game star, and done. If we do it after shifting Sandland instead of before. Press C right immediately as you spawn, piano roll away the text box and chain 3 long jumps. This movement is consistent and fast. Grab the 8 reds and collect the star to be done with the stage.
A bad dream, or something similar. And yet, this was only the beginning of the unsettling activity. Soon the couple began to experience what can only be described as poltergeist activity. They would hear movement in their bedroom when they were downstairs watching television together. Their dog, a young German shepherd, seemed to sense the unseeable, being wary of certain parts of the house and, as time passed, even Heather. On one occasion, when Joe went upstairs to investigate a strange series of thuds coming from the bedroom, he was confronted by a foul odour, that of stale urine and bad drains. With time, the same bad smells seemed to follow Heather, despite her having always prided herself on her personal hygiene. And so, far from it just being Heather, Joe also experienced paranormal manifestations. Indeed, one night when the couple fled the house in fear after increasingly aggressive bangs were heard coming from their bedroom.
We move on to Hazy Maze Cave. Tone spawns at 12 stars, so we have to collect the star in HMC first, the Nessie or Dory star. Enter the first door, and then enter the next door on the right to activate the elevator. Run off the platform as soon as possible and bump into the wall to avoid fall damage. Run here and push against the wall in this spot. Once the elevator gets closer, switch to pushing more upright, and depending on how good your angle is, you can fall right into the star.
Joe claimed to have seen a figure standing just beyond the open drapes of the window. Not only that, he distinctly remembered opening the window earlier in the evening. By the time he saw the figure, it was closed. My blood ran cold, Joe later explained. Somebody had shut it. Even though the couple spent several days away from the house, staying with Joe's aunt, the activity did not stop. In fact, it got worse. Heather experienced strange bouts of disassociation. She would appear silent and far off. This quickly evolved to even more unsettling instances when Heather was not at all herself. During one particularly frightening episode, she even attempted to crash the car as Joe was driving. It was the 6th of March, 1992. Whilst downstairs at home together, the couple's dog had alerted them to the presence of an invisible intruder. What followed was both Heather and Joe allegedly witnessing the apparition of an older woman in the corner of the room. It was, so Heather claimed, undoubtedly her nan's cell. She was wearing the same blue nightgown.
Now the toad has spawned. Now you can long jump over to the toad, run into him and press B, still while running into him. And now you're free to grab the easiest star of the run. By the way, we don't get the star as the 15th one because then MIPS wouldn't spawn. The 15th star has to be collected in a stage to make MIPS spawn. Up next, the emergency exit star. If you
as before, the Spectre was also grinning. According to Cameron Lendrum's description of the case, it seemed utterly malevolent. Not only that, similar to the apparition's first appearance, the figure raised its hand to its throat. Only this time, as the Spectre began to choke itself, Heather, seated on the sofa next to Joe, also started to choke. Inexplicably, so the testimony claims, her shoulders were shaking and she was gurgling. Horrifyingly, as Joe rushed to help his stricken girlfriend, he noticed a hand fastened around her throat. It did not belong.
Want, you can kill the scuttlebug first. It can be in the way sometimes, but your goal should be to get onto this platform and long jump over to the next platform that has the star. First, it can be in the way sometimes, but your goal should be to get onto this platform and long jump over to the next platform that has the star on it, and you're done. 2 more stars remaining in this run.
To the young woman. Instead, it was aged and wizened, as though it belonged to the old woman who had only moments ago materialized in the room. Indeed, according to Joe, there was even a spectral blue cuff at the wrist, the same as Nan Sel's nightgown. With tremendous effort, Joe was able to liberate Heather from the unearthly attack by seizing the grisly ghostly hand and commanding it to go. Heather was shaken and breathless. Joe immediately told her that they needed to leave. As they got up to go, they allegedly heard the sound of footsteps overhead, followed by their bedroom door opening. Then, when they tried to leave through the front door, they could not. It was stuck. Strangely, the lock would not move. In the end, the couple had to force their way from the house via a downstairs window. On the car journey to Joe's aunt's house, Heather is said to have been overcome by a malevolent force once again. This time, rather than being choked, she dove across the car and latched onto the steering wheel, violently wresting control of the car away from Joe. Mad with superhuman strength, the young woman was forcing the car on a collision course. It was only when, by chance, Joe invoked the name of Jesus Christ, shouting, "Jesus Christ, Heather, stop it," that the possessed woman released the wheel. When she next spoke, she did so in a voice that was not her own. Aggressive and cussing, it first laughed mockingly before going on to insult Joe's aunt. Bizarrely, the voice even described what Joe's aunt was doing at that very moment, information that was not known to either Joe or Heather. All the while, Heather is said to have had a wide, ugly grin, the rest of her face immobile, forehead and cheeks drawn taut, eyes wide open and staring. She had tried to end them. It was utterly unnatural. Joe was horrified. When eventually Heather returned to normal, she had no recollection of the incident. Undoubtedly, the malevolent activity was centered on Heather. In addition to the different voices, foul odors, and their dog's changed behavior around her, she would wake in the night startled and screaming after feeling spectral hands touching her. In the end, Heather confided in a doctor, concerned that her mental health struggles from the past were resurfacing. Incredibly, despite being a man of science, the doctor is said to have advised her something few medical practitioners would even consider. He recommended that Heather go and see a Christian minister. And so it was that Heather Mitchelson met Canon William H. Landrum. The couple travelled 80 miles to Belfast to meet the elderly exorcist in his home. Straight away, the canon knew that this was not a simple case of an earthbound spirit terrorising the couple. It was far worse. It was demonic. Aided by two assistants, Landrum had immediately
Re-enter HMC, and this time you'll have to hope for good boulder RNG. So there is a random chance one of these stones hits the left wall and you'll have to dodge it. I got good RNG in this run, and with a double jump or a side flip wall kick, I can get up to the 15th star.
moved to perform a major exorcism on the young woman. After administering the Eucharist, the malevolent controlling force is said to have revealed its presence. Heather was, according to Landrum's testimony, hideously transformed. Her neck had become impossibly elongated, the facial skin had tightened, and the lips were drawn back into a mocking smirk. As for the young woman's eyes, they were not her own. Instead, they fixed on the exorcist with blazing hatred. Once Landrum announced to the others present that there was a demon in the room, the young woman launched herself at Joe. Further religious provocation by Landrum, including commanding the foul and evil spirit to leave in the name of Jesus Christ, resulted in a voice growling out from the young woman's throat. Chillingly, it declared, "You'll never get rid of me. She's mine. She never belonged to him. She's ours. Before the sperm met the egg, she was ours." All the while, so Canon Landrum recalled several years later, the young woman slithered off the sofa onto the floor. Cackling and taunting, her body was writhing strangely. Her movements were unnatural and yet entirely in keeping with the behaviours allegedly exhibited by other demonically possessed individuals all throughout place and time. As the religious provocation of the exorcism continued, the woman became increasingly hostile towards Landrum and his assistants. Indeed, at one point, she is even described as constraining the 68-year-old exorcist in a body lock. According to Landrum, despite being barely 5 feet tall, her arms and fists seemed to belong to a strongly built man. Dramatically, she repeatedly punched the exorcist in the jaw. Meanwhile, Landrum's two assistants tried and failed to pull her off him. Heather simply shrugged the men away, boasting the easy strength of a freestyle wrestler as she knocked them to the floor. In the end, it was the power of Christ alone that is said to have stopped the inhuman strength that possessed the young woman. With the words, "In the name of Jesus, stop," she fell to the floor as if struck by a heavy object. From there, Canon Landrum was able to continue the exorcism, praying over the young woman, commanding whatever foul entities possessed her to reveal themselves and depart. As this happened, Heather's body contorted, with the two assistants now restraining her to protect both herself and the others in the room. Horrifically, as Lendrum continued his work, the voice that came from the young woman's mouth is said to have changed. Sometimes it was that of an elderly woman. At other times, it was masculine and sneering. Abhorrently, at one point the voice even declared, "I am Uncle Seth, lover of the little ones, robber of the little souls, killer of the innocents." The voice, now roaring, stated that it would never leave her and that they would lead her to lose her life. After a great deal of effort, with Jesus continuing to be invoked, Canon Lendrum described facilitating the deliverance of the young woman. Her partner, Joe, described a lifting sensation in the room when it happened, as if a presence had departed. Heather had fainted. When consciousness returned, she had no recollection of anything that had happened. And yet, tragically, this is not the end of Heather's story. That was to come a mere 6 months later. As is often the case in similar instances of alleged demonic possession, Heather relapsed, and the dark voices and unnatural activity returned. Oftentimes when this is so, the demoniac is described as returning to the exorcist, with further rounds of exorcism being administered. This was not the case for Heather Mitchelson. Talking some 15 years later to authors David M. Keeley and Christina McKenna, Canon Lendrum revealed that Heather, a necessary pseudonym for this tragic young woman, had taken her own life. Despite Lendrum having visited Heather several times after the exorcism, she had ultimately succumbed to the darkness of her past, both spiritual and material. She was found in her bedroom, the ceiling light fitting her chosen method of exit. Her end thus a chilling mirror to the spectre who had taunted her with a choking hand around the throat. Lendrum did not believe that the spectre was her Nan's cell. Evil spirits can masquerade as the dead, he explained solemnly during his interview. There is, so he continued, the distinct possibility that the uncle and the grandmother were both demonized in their lifetimes. Her traumatic history, in which young Heather had been so badly failed by the adults in her life, had tragically exposed her to evil. There was, in short, no defense against it. Dark doorways had been created, and so, Canon Lendrum explained, having to cope with this day after day, week after week, year after year, had a terrible and lasting effect. He called it psychic stress, adding that Satan's bid for our souls is predicated on the debasement of our humanness as early as possible in our childhood. According to this worldview, there is no line to draw between phenomena which are rooted in the paranormal and phenomena which are rooted in mental health crises. They are not mutually exclusive, but rather feed each other. Undoubtedly, Heather was impacted and influenced by the trauma of her childhood. Could it be that rather than explain away the alleged paranormal activity that was witnessed by independent third parties such as Canon Lendrum, it instead opened gateways to the demonic realm? It is therefore a valid and necessary conclusion that children above all ought to be protected from evil of every variety, a statement which ought to be so obvious, natural and straightforward that it need not be said. But sadly, in the world of preternatural darkness in which we find ourselves, it is perhaps more necessary to assert than ever before.
Imagine your mind unraveling. Your thoughts cannot fully form. Your pattern of thinking is corrupted. You begin to say things involuntarily. Horrible things. Things you never meant to say.
Jump kick or long jump over the pond and leave the room. Now we want to grab the bunny MIPS and use it to skip a big portion of the game. This trick is called MIPS clip. In the video description I added a link for the MIPS clip tutorial, including an explanation on how to grab the bunny, as well as a few helpful backups. This is the core of a 16-star run, and getting consistent at this trick is inevitable if you want to do full game runs. Oh, and grabbing the MIP star as the 16th star won't work. You'll have to collect the DDD sub star to make the second Bowser level spawn. But the run won't be invalid either if you accidentally collect the MIP star. Just finish the run with 17 stars. Now let's enter Dire Docks. Hi, this is Strogi. Welcome to this beginner tutorial for the MIPS clip used in 16-star runs. I will first show you how to grab MIPS, then how to do the clip, and then I will show you backups for 3 scenarios. Have fun! First of all, we'll have a look at an easy way to grab MIPS. Mash C left before entering this door. Perform a long jump and a dive. Make sure to roll out with A and B because the timing on the slope is kind of hard. Do another dive and you get here the same time as MIPS, which leaves you a lot of time to land the final dive. Try to dive along this line and slow down so MIPS just runs into you. If you miss him, I have a backup for you later in this video. But now we can start with the setup. Firstly, if you're on emulator and you cannot consistently see Mario's shadow, go follow the emulator guide linked in the description to fix this issue, because for this setup you will need to be able to see the shadow. Okay, do not collect the star. Grab MIPS, leave the Mario cam and go over here. Depending on where you look, the camera will adjust and kind of follow Mario's direction of view. Use that to walk to the right edge of the door. Have the camera so that it points slightly more right than just perpendicularly straight forward to the door. Like this, you can just hold up slightly. You keep doing that until MIPS shadow disappears. This is where you want to stop immediately. And now all you have to do to clip into the door is press and hold Z. Use your stick to crawl and turn around until you face MIPS. Then, before you go neutral on the stick, press B. Mario does not have to get up for you to be able to punch. And now you're holding him inside the door. All you have to do now is to hold down and jump until you're out of the door. Turn around and move towards the 30-star door and keep jumping to accelerate Mario a bit. This clip is much easier. Go into the right edge of the door again with a similar cam as last time. Now just press C and you should be through. Congrats! Now 3 backups for you. If you miss MIPS, you can run here. Do a side flip, dive and slowly slide down aiming for this line, and he will just run into you. Number 2, if you cannot grab MIPS and you don't know why, do the following. Keep the stick neutral so Mario doesn't enter the door opening animation. Now you want to do a neutral jump, and only while in air, you hold down right towards MIPS. Do this a few times and there's a chance you can still grab the bunny. However, if it clips into the 30-star door and cannot be seen anymore, MIPS is gone. You'll have to enter the basement key door again and return to make MIPS respawn. This is Strogi. I hope this video helped you. If it did, let me know in the comments. And
compunctions to do terrible things seem overwhelming. You must use your utmost will to stop it. Fatigue sets in as you seem to be wrestling with thoughts and urges that are not your own all of the time. Your consciousness fades in and out, and in those blank spaces, others tell you that you are doing odd and frightening things. You go to a doctor, and there is nothing biologically wrong with you. You even begin to harm yourself, and disembodied voices begin to encourage you to do more. Around you, people eventually tell you to do something that even the mention of irritates you. Find spiritual counseling. These ailments are not unusual and have been reported by people of all faiths across all time. In Christian tradition, someone experiencing these ailments would probably be considered demonically possessed. A demon being a fallen angel or related hellish spiritual entity that is seeking the downfall of mankind on behalf of their overlord, Satan. Demonic possession has a very well-established tradition in the Catholic Church that traces its roots thousands of years ago to the time of Jesus Christ, who is claimed to be the greatest exorcist, one who casts out demons from the afflicted. The exorcist today is an established profession within the Catholic Church. The International Association of Exorcists has around 900 members worldwide in 58 countries. Exorcists are, according to the church, the witnesses, the voice, and the ambassadors of Christ and of the church to those suffering because of the evil one. This viewpoint of humans suffering at the hands of a demonic other from a hellish realm is well established in people's minds, especially because that is the way countless Hollywood films have portrayed the phenomena. However, what if there was another way to see the phenomena spiritually, one that is different from the way Rome and Hollywood wishes to define it? In Japan, there are many who see these demons not as a hellish entity, but rather as the corrupted souls of their ancestors. Yoshida Sensei claimed that he, his wife, and family were afflicted by such corrupted souls from their family. These entities were said to have hounded, tormented, tortured, and even ended the lives of members of his family. To him, exorcism was not a combative exercise between the forces of good and evil, but rather an act of karmic purification through which the souls of both the living and the dead were saved. My name is Laura, and you are watching The Paranormal Scholar. In 1969, Yoshida Sensei was a prominent bureaucrat who worked on writing university entrance exams for the Ministry of Education in Nakayama, Japan. In his spare time, he would tour the country, giving lectures on human relations to audiences, often under the aegis of the Red Cross. During one of these lectures, a member of his audience developed a severe toothache that suddenly left his whole face swollen. The pain caused a scene, but, luckily for him, one of the other members of the audience was a devotee of Mahikari. This was a new and burgeoning religious movement that originated in Japan in 1959. Mahikari roughly translates to true light, and is a religion that seemingly syncretized Eastern and Western religious and esoteric thought into one belief system. One of their most extraordinary assertions is that anyone can do miracles and channel divine light through them to heal sicknesses, purify, and exorcise demons. This can be done by raising your hands up over a person and using prayer and meditation to allow divine light to flow through you and onto the afflicted person. One of the terms used to describe this action is okiyomi. That day in 1969, the Mahikari member put their hands over the man's swollen face and performed okiyomi. Before an astonished crowd and Yoshida, the swelling immediately went down. Yoshida Sensei remained skeptical, but the experience piqued his interest in the new religion. He started attending their lectures and after a while became convinced. Thus, he became a full member of their church and received an amulet which would help him give okiyomi to others. Yoshida described the initiation as a transformative moment and felt as though he was walking on clouds during his purification. However, when Yoshida started to try to purify his wife, it seemed to awaken something dreadful lingering within her. As Yoshida would administer okiyomi to her, she described feeling a fist-sized lump moving around her body, seemingly trying to escape the light. As she attended one of the 3-day lectures at the church, she was bothered the entire time by a dreadfully cold sensation in her hips and had to be constantly encumbered by pillows just to keep warm. When she received the amulet, the cold sensation went away, to be soon replaced by more horrific symptoms. On their way home from the ceremony, she developed flu-like symptoms, and when she got home, she realized that she had lost control of her bowels. Initially, she thought these symptoms were signs that she was being cleansed of whatever evil was in her. A rash then developed on her skin where the amulet was, with an evil-smelling pus emanating from the sores. She at first gave thanks for the sores, but when they would not go away, she put some talcum powder on it, which only made the rash worse. She apologized to the divine for her lack of faith, and the rash went away. Soon after this incident, their son developed strange symptoms too, particularly in his foot, which the local doctor diagnosed as polio and recommended 6 months of electrotherapy. The family at this point decided to speak to the local Mahikari minister about the ailment, who said that it was not polio, but rather a warning from their ancestors to move the family's ancestral shrine away from the top of their filing cabinet, as they considered that to be disrespectful. In due course, they moved the shrine, and okiyomi was administered on Yoshida's son's foot, and they claim he was very quickly cured of polio. At this point in the narrative, it is important to stress that the Yoshidas were not people initially averse to medicine. They had been a well-off family that for many generations had profited and believed in every aspect of their society. It was after the badly managed death of his father and death of his daughter, which Yoshida believed had something to do with medical negligence, that he drifted towards the more esoteric forms of healing. And so, Okiyomi had become routine in Yoshida's household, and whilst they claimed many benefits, it did seem to exacerbate.
So, on N64 and even on emulator with the correct settings found in the emulator setup guide, you should press R twice before you land in the water of Dire Docks. That places the camera so that you get less lag. Keep on swimming and if possible hold C left while approaching the tunnel. You can then leave C left and try to keep swimming in the optimal rhythm. After the first part of the tunnel, swim up and at this spot start holding C left. If it helps, the optimal swimming rhythm is said to be around 90 BPM, which is pretty much the Lazy Song by Bruno Mars, just in case that helps you. In fact, the rhythm to reach optimal swimming speed is quite lenient. When jumping out of the water, Mario will carry momentum in the direction he's facing, so make sure to look forward while jumping out of the water, so you can land on the fin. Side flip and jump dive onto the sub and grab the star in such heavy lag that this part kind of feels like slow motion.
Exacerbate spiritual turmoil. One time, as Yoshida was purifying his wife, she began to draw circles with her hands, a sign that she was possessed by a malevolent spirit. He began to question this spirit, who, after interrogation, admitted to being his uncle, who had ended his own life as a young boy at school by jumping from a train at Uchida Station in the city. It was believed not just by Yoshida but by others also that the boy had become a yibakuri, a sort of Japanese poltergeist bound to a specific location that possesses supernatural abilities to inflict harm and cause havoc. By the time it appeared to Yoshida's wife, it claimed to have been a practiced killer, sensationally claiming to have already taken the lives of several others as a ghost. For over a year, they tried to exorcise this malevolent entity, to no avail. It would just keep appearing in the form of something very strange, a demonic sort of badger inside of Yoshida's wife that was determined to take her life. According to the spirit, it was trying to do this by tactically inflicting a sense of disorientation and dizziness. One time, he claimed to have almost attained his end when he caused her to become dizzy as she was riding her bicycle over a bridge. As the uncle had died from falling onto a train, it seemed that he had, after death, the supernatural ability to inflict that same sensation of falling onto others. The idea of karma here is very important. The notion that an act or feeling is not transitory, but rather imprints itself upon your soul and becomes part of your spirit's very long journey. Author Winston Davis refers to this type of phenomena as homeopathic possession, as in there is a like produces like aspect to the possession. Someone that fell is trying to cause someone else to fall. The role of the exorcist in these situations is to redress the karmic imbalance through an act of respect or otherwise that serves to unbind the initial act which so aggrieved and caused a spirit to become malevolent, to, in a sense, heal its perturbed soul, basically making the poltergeist snap out of it. At this point, failing to exorcise his uncle's perturbed spirit, Yoshida consulted a more senior member of their church, who advised them to go to the spot where his uncle had died and give offerings. Determined to do so at every spot they suspected he had died at the train station, Yoshida planned a daily pilgrimage for a week to the very station to bring his uncle's spirit peace. In a remarkable synchronicity, on the first day of his pilgrimage, he met an old man who not only knew about the incident, but had actually held the young boy as he died in his arms many years prior. He pointed them to the exact spot, and so they placed many offerings there and prayed for the uncle's spirit to attain peace. After this, Yoshida performed Okiyomi on his wife, and it is claimed that the uncle's spirit appeared before them, but rather this time as a normal human boy, repenting and giving thanks. He apologized for all his misdeeds, including apparently having given Yoshida's wife's grandfather cancer. After this confession, he disappeared to the astral world and, presumably, found peace. Whilst a year-long struggle to exorcise a demonic uncle from trying to murder his wife might seem like the climax of Yoshida's spiritual struggle, it was merely a prelude. In fact, the family's actions seemed to open the doors for distant ancestors to come and possess the body of Yoshida's wife and torment her with illnesses and afflictions. His family had a long history in the area as lance masters for their local lord at Nakayama Castle. In this position, they were wealthy, but also had a violent history, and thus had a weighty karmic imbalance. Yoshida could not even recognize many of the spirits who came through. One he did recognize, however, was his great-great-grandfather, a man who had done many nasty deeds in his life, one of which was to curse his own family. During this man's life, he had many servants, and one day he impregnated one of them. When the infant was born, realizing the shame it would bring upon his position and family, he took the child's life. This act supposedly transformed the infant into a vengeful poltergeist that would periodically come and take the lives of Yoshida's family members. Most recently, his own father had claimed to have been taken by this wrathful entity. Now, the very same being was inhabiting his wife, aiming to do the same to end her life in order to make him suffer. Through their church and by using the practice of okiyomi, it was claimed that they were able to exorcise these malevolent ancestral entities. Another one that was said to have been particularly nasty and incredibly personal was the spirit of Yoshida's own father, which, again, is said to have possessed his wife. Apparently, he was aggrieved because he wanted to die at home, and his son had let him die at the hospital. In his wrath, he had caused the sickness of their daughter, and horrifically induced her to lose her life at the very same hospital, in the very same room where he had died. Whilst in the fits of being possessed by him, Yoshida's wife cried out, "It was I who took the life of your daughter. I knew it was wrong to make her sick, but in the other world I was lonely and in agony." It's harrowing and impossible to imagine that those words could have come out easily from a mother's mouth. And yet,
now, let us enter the second Bowser level. At the start, there's a trick called Pole Glitch, and once again, let's see what experts suggest on that. 1.4 out of 10. Aki, the 16-star goat, says, "I think you don't need this before a sub 16. Enough said. So try to get up the stage as quickly as possible. To get onto this platform, you can also use a lava boost, and to get these wall kicks you can just do a side flip and then chain a few more wall kicks. So these platforms here are based on a cycle. They slowly rise and lower and rise and lower. I get the early cycle because I have advanced movement. You might lose quite some time over me in this stage, so it's definitely worth practicing it, but it's not too bad if you lose 1 or 2 cycles. At the end here, you can long jump on this part of the edge. Try to enter Mario Cam as soon as possible to reduce a lot of lag, and keep long jumping until you get closer to the end of the stage to enter the Bowser fight, with quite low health. Obviously you want to survive this battle, so avoid fall damage or hitting the lava. A safe way to do it is to press C down soon, stay neutral and do a full jump over Bowser and then kick before you hit the floor so you can stand close to his tail. Do not avoid fall damage with the ground pound. You could clip through the platform you're standing on and die. At around this moment, when the platform starts shaking quickly, you can grab Bowser's tail and start spinning. Hit the bomb and safely collect the key that opens the door to the upper floor.
according to their testimonies, they did. The father was supposedly also aggrieved that his son had been selling off ancestral farmlands. Yoshida recalled how he had tremendous trouble throughout all his business dealings in regards to the land, and this was allegedly caused by his father's vengeful spirit. After much purification and deep, tearful conversations, Yoshida and his father are said to have found peace with one another. During the day of final benediction, Yoshida called in his sisters, and they all said farewell to the spirit of their father, and he, like the others, went off into the astral realm to find peace. After being taken to the brink of death and back, these spiritual exorcisms profoundly affected Yoshida and his family. Indeed, after it was all done, it even inspired them to set up a purification temple in the area to help treat others going through similar afflictions. The temple grew in membership and became a font of spiritual holiness in the area, with people claiming its mere presence had reduced the number of traffic accidents and even made typhoons avoid the location. There are many ways to view what happened to Yoshida and his family. To Western ears, what happened to Yoshida's wife may seem too bizarre to even be contemplated by both believers and skeptics. Some may well say that they were demons pretending to be family members. After all, why would there be so many and so suddenly? This line of thought, however, ignores famous Christian exorcisms, such as the ones undertaken by Father Reisinger in the early 20th century on Anna Eklund, where billions and billions of devils were said to have been exorcised and locked up in hell. According to Yoshida's belief system and wider traditional Japanese thought, a look into the karmic legacy of her family would have been much more beneficial to exorcising Anna Eklund. Then, of course, there are the endless mental gymnastics performed by skeptics in order to conjure words including fugue, hysteria, and perhaps even simpleton. That Yoshida's wife was merely suffering from something of her own imagination or psychological trauma, without ever pinpointing to an exact cause or reason. And whilst we should not entertain ungrounded, overly skeptical perspectives, it is still important to consider psychological factors in this case. After all, even if they didn't directly cause the spiritual manifestations, they may have exacerbated them. For example, the loss of Yoshida's daughter would have undoubtedly affected both him and his wife in a deep and difficult to understand manner. It is, of course, unnatural for you to outlive your child. Could it be that in her grief, Yoshida's wife saw blaming her death on the perturbed and malevolent spirit of her father-in-law as a way to make sense of her grief? That is, of course, not to undermine the wider happenings of this case, but merely to provide an alternative perspective that makes sense of and validates the deeply personal and traumatic experiences of the family. Add to this that their daughter passed in the very same room as the father. It could be that this was an act of sense-making that accounted for this traumatic and unexpected factor in the case. It must be stated that in grief, people will think and do all manner of things in order to come to terms with their loss. Of course, that is not to say that what happened to the Yoshida family was an imagining of Yoshida's wife's grieving mind. Indeed, the scale, scope, and physical ailments suggest otherwise. Suggest that there was some sort of supernatural, preternatural element. And so, regardless, whilst the trappings may be different, the symptoms suffered by Yoshida's wife would be recognizable to any Christian exorcist. Unknown ailments, speaking with other people's voices, and mysterious knowledge of events and people. Even the cold she experienced around her hips can be said to be similar to many people who experience malevolent hauntings, with the notion of temperature changes, particularly cold spots, being commonplace. Malevolent spiritual possession is universal, with many of the same symptoms appearing time and time again throughout many different cultures. One must begin to question why this is. And yet, in the case of the Yoshidas, what is perhaps most intriguing and indeed different is how the family went about exorcism. Unlike stories involving
Now we get to the final spurt of the run, the BLJs, backward long jumps. Re-enter Bowser in the Fire Sea, stand still and press start and exit the stage to reach the lobby. Stay Mario Camp to avoid some of the lag here causes. Double jump to grab this glitchy ledge and reach next door a bit sooner, and now the BLJ start. What you wanna do for BLJs basically is face the bottom of the stairs, long jump, turn around and mash A, going up the stairs and hoping that you connect with the stairs and can build up speed. BOJs are based on luck up to some extent, so it might take you a while to get them for the first time. Don't despair. Check out the description for a BOJ guide, but remember, there's no correct and consistent way to do them. On the endless stair BOJ though, make sure to face slightly right as opposed to slightly left. If you're facing a bit too far left, it might clip you into the stage Wet Dry World, making you lose the run. Once you reach the top, enter the pipe for the final stage and split. Bowser in the sky. I recommend playing this stage safe as there are a lot of ways to fall down and possibly even die. You might know the triple jump dive to skip this part of the run, but that barely saves time for a beginner, so I skip it here and just chain a few long jumps. On these elevators, side flip to the right for a nice shortcut. Triple jump up the slope and keep on running. Turn around and long jump, and I do a somewhat tricky series of jump kicks and a triple jump dive to get past this part. If you feel like that's too hard, you can just ride the elevator and then climb up the big long pole. Coming up, more elevators, and one of the elevator hitboxes is pretty weird, so I hope you don't get that one. Long jump from the very top of the elevators and avoid the Goomba. Then enter the big pipe for the final fight.
Counterparts. Whilst there was priestly guidance, there was no overt intercession from an outside authority figure. The Yoshidas took this as a deeply personal and spiritual experience and managed it themselves. It transformed the family. The emotional baggage of their own and their ancestors' lives was confronted, and in the crucible, they forged a new identity for themselves. Years later, Mrs. Yoshida was considered a holy maternal figure in the area who would preside over the temple in an iconic pink kimono, raising her hands and administering light healing. To reach that point from a position of illness with evil-smelling pus coming from rashes all over her body, as she is continually possessed by wrathful entities, is inspiring. Thus, whilst the cause of the ailment is difficult to comprehend, this case gives a rare example of possession being not only cured, but transmuted into something beneficial. True spiritual alchemy.
When we consider exorcism, specific imagery populates the mind. A Catholic priest, firmly devout, bearing rosary and crucifix as they address an enraged demoniac. Holy water deployed to subdue and, as the rite progresses, bless. Prayers, scripture, invocation of angels, saints, Christ and God, aiming to force the demonic entity within to reveal and identify itself in order for the exorcist to cast it out. Rarely would our first instinct be to imagine a dark-cloaked magician summoning the demon force in an attempt to dominate its will, bind it to an object, and thus sever its energetic tie to the demonically oppressed victim. And yet, such is precisely what David Devereux, a self-proclaimed British professional magician who specialises in curse removal and the elimination of non-physical entities, alleges is possible. For him, exorcism is a magical operation that requires the exorcist to harness universal energy in order to help ordinary people facing non-ordinary situations. Situations that are dangerously supernatural, and sometimes situations that the victim brought upon themselves by meddling with the very same universal energy that Devereux uses to heal. My name is Laura, and you are watching The Paranormal Scholar. By the time David Devereux wrote his 2006 book, Memoirs of an Exorcist, he had been studying, working and practicing within the paranormal field for over 2 decades. It was whilst working for a company that specialised in solving spiritual problems called Athena Consulting that he met a man he refers to in his book as Phil. Introduced via a mutual friend, Devereux was told that Phil had recently started acting out of character. He was having strange dreams, struggling to sleep, and oddly exhibited new and obsessive behaviour around always needing to know what the time was. The mutual friend was concerned, especially as Phil had what was perceived to be an unhealthy interest in magic and the occult. Wondering whether or not something had gone wrong, the friend thus arranged for Devereaux to meet Phil in person. When they met in London a couple of days later for a drink, Devereaux could instantly tell, so he writes in his memoir, that this guy was seriously screwed up. Pale, with a drawn, sunken look about him, Phil also looked at his watch uneasily every minute or so. When Devereaux asked him if there was anything wrong, Phil dismissed the question and said it was nothing. Eventually, their conversation turned towards esoterica. At this point, Phil revealed that he had an interest in chaos magic and had done a couple of ritual workings in an attempt to help his career in the city of London. Throughout the conversation, it became apparent to Devereaux that whilst not overtly possessed, Phil was most certainly under the influence of something demonic. Something had obviously happened to knock him pretty thoroughly sideways. The next time he and Devereaux met, Phil invited his new friend back to his flat in order to lend him a book. Once at his home, Devereaux realised just how dire Phil's situation was. Externally, so Devereaux describes, it wasn't anything special, just another anonymous flat in an anonymous block. And yet, as soon as he crossed the threshold, he claimed he was hit by a wave of psychic energy that was dark and rotten. In the man's living room, there was a small collection of what Devereaux determined to be advanced occult literature that could easily get an amateur into a lot of trouble, as well as ritual candles, knives, a wand, and a chalice. Devereaux was certain that that was the room in which Phil had done whatever it was that was responsible for his current situation. When he confronted him directly, Phil confessed. After reading a book on magic, desperate to get ahead at work, he had cursed someone who was in line for a promotion he wanted. Not only that, he had summoned a demonic entity to help him do it. Supposedly, it had all gone wrong, the result being that, in addition to sleeplessness and horrific nightmares, Phil was now bound to the demon, drained of energy, terrified, and certain that he'd be dead in a few days. Given his appearance, Devereaux claims that he was not entirely convinced the latter was untrue. And so it was that, standing in Phil's paranormally ravaged flat, Devereaux decided to intervene. Clearly frustrated by the man's naivety, he took the lead, instructing Phil to help him set up everything that he would need to confront the demonic entity to which he was unhappily bound. Candles, incense, ritual robes. According to Devereaux, in magic, ritual serves only one purpose: to allow the participants to achieve a state in which they believe totally that magic is real, possible, and will work. And given what he and Phil were about to attempt, it was important they both had absolute certainty of belief. Before we continue, I kindly ask for a brief moment to thank the sponsor of today's video, our very own Rowton's Museum of the Paranormal and Spirituality. Owned and curated by myself and my husband Eric, the museum is a living archive of humanity's attempts to understand the unseen. From demonic possession and exorcism to spirit communication, to folk magic, psychic phenomena, religious artifacts associated with miracles and healing, to those said to be haunted and cursed. Rowton's Museum isn't a haunted house attraction. It's a scholarly and contemplative space for those who are curious about the boundary between the spiritual, the psychological, the sacred, and the paranormal. In many ways, the very questions that we explore here on The Paranormal Scholar. Not only that, the museum is based inside of Penuel Chapel and Schoolhouse, a beautiful heritage building with its very own supernatural history. Throughout January and February, the museum will be open to the public on Sunday afternoons, 12 p.m. to 4 p.m, for you to explore our collection of hundreds of artifacts, ask questions, and engage thoughtfully with these extraordinary subjects. And for those seeking something deeper, Eric and I also host evening seances and paranormal investigations, where you can take part in structured, respectful experiments in spirit communication within a historic setting. So if today's case has sparked your curiosity, we'd love to welcome you in person in Carmarthen, Wales. Our next investigation is next week, Saturday the 27th of December. You'll find details, dates and bookings linked below. Now, let us return to the case. Taking a moment to focus his intention, and so he explains, pull energy together, Devereaux selected a piece of black obsidian from Phil's shelf and placed it inside of one of the 2 magical circles he had drawn within the room. The candles were lit, and Devereaux began reciting the opening part of the ritual. As for Phil, his job, as instructed by the more senior magician of the pair, was to hold the notes and stand close by, safely inside their protected workspace. As the ritual progressed, Devereaux claims Phil's expression was getting less and less happy. Not only that, the room was getting darker and the atmosphere thicker. It is at this point that Devereaux's testimony invites the reader to suspend disbelief. After all, he describes the arrival and appearance of the demon said to have been originally summoned by Phil. Said to have been short, squat, pale and ugly, it is unclear from his writing whether or not Devereaux encountered the entity as a flesh and blood creature, or within the meditative space of his mind's eye, or indeed through the material and thus demonically possessed body of Phil. Whatever the case, according to his memoir, an exchange between him and the demon then took place. By his own admission, his plan was foolhardy and dangerous, and in hindsight should not have been his first course of action. Regardless, with full disregard for the preternatural entity's energetic power and, most importantly, its unnatural authority over Phil, Devereaux demanded that the demon acknowledge the other man was essentially his magical chattel. In short, an attempt to lie, and thus convince the demon that Phil was, in fact, the property of Devereaux, and therefore could not be bound by it. As Devereaux attempted this, he describes having heard a deep, vibrating snarl echo through his head. The entity was not happy, and crucially, it was not convinced by the magician-exorcist's attempts to trick it. Chillingly, the demon is claimed to have responded with the following declaration: "It is mine, and I shall have you as well." At this point, Devereaux admits he was not feeling confident about how the ritual was progressing. High on bravado, he had overplayed his hand. The demon was simply not going to relinquish Phil from its bondage because he claimed it had to. As for Phil, he was visibly terrified. With no other option, Devereaux continued reciting and chanting from the notes he had prepared before starting the summoning ritual. He emphasized deep, regular breaths and, a contrast to his prior state, a calm demeanor. His plan now was to bind the demon in place, specifically to force its energy inside the lump of black obsidian. Inside the magical circle designated for both the demon and the obsidian, the air is said to have shimmered slightly, as if the preternatural entity was aware of what was coming and was attempting to leave. According to Devereaux's testimony, the room also got colder suddenly. Then, terrifyingly, Phil, who had for the duration of the ritual been standing alongside Devereaux, started to respond strangely. He supposedly let out a little whimper, after which his expression became increasingly dreamy-eyed. Sensationally, it is suggested that the entity was attempting to assert control over the other man's body by making him faint. According to Devereaux, if Phil fell across the border of the circle, it would break a lot of the protections that had been set up in the course of the ritual. Such would mean that the demonic entity would have an exit route, or indeed that it would have better access to Devereaux himself. And so, as he focused his intention, recited the magic, and commanded the demon into the piece of obsidian, Devereaux had to occasionally pat the other man on the cheek to rouse him back to full consciousness. Then, as the binding approached, Phil is said to have fainted. In Devereaux's own words, just like that, his eyes slammed shut, and he dropped like a sack of potatoes. Fortunately, the magician exorcist was able to catch him as he collapsed, guiding him to land somewhat folded up inside the protective circle, and thus, crucially, away from disturbing the barrier of the other. Now continuing the ritual alone, Devereaux describes throwing every ounce of energy he could spare into stuffing this demon into the piece of rock that was just inside its circle. As he did, the demon is supposed to have appealed to him, promising anything and everything to avoid imprisonment. Power of every sort, money, women. All he had to do was stop. But so, Devereaux writes, he didn't. It wasn't going anywhere but into that lump of obsidian. Phil still passed out on the floor, Devereaux concluded the binding. He describes the rock changing, almost as if he could see the top of the obsidian opening much wider than it had any right to if physical laws were involved. Inside, so he claims, he saw a huge dark space, which seemed to swirl like a whirlpool. A final, terrific moment of resistance from the demon, and it was said to have been drawn, stretched like modelling clay towards the obsidian. After that, it was gone, and the rock looked perfectly normal again. It was over. Devereaux then describes closing down the magic circles and wrapping the obsidian in his handkerchief. He proceeded to wake Phil and force him to promise to abandon his interest in black magic. The obsidian was removed from the flat, with Devereaux clear in his mind that what he had done that day was one of the dumbest things he had ever attempted in his life. As he writes in his memoir, research and backup are your friends. Working as a lone wolf is a great way to get your head handed to you on a plate. Undoubtedly, many parts of Devereaux's story are difficult to believe, something which is not helped by what can only be described as his creative flair. Alternatively referred to in online reviews as deadpan humour and ridiculous, it does little to strengthen his credibility, despite the undeniable fact that much of what he speaks of in his book is well grounded in the philosophies of both Western esoteric traditions and other belief systems. When he describes being greatly influenced by the writings of the British occultist and ceremonial magician Dion Fortune from the age of 13, he seems well read and grounded. When he discusses the universal relevancy of, or as he terms it, the multi-model school approach towards the ancient Eastern philosophical concept of Tao and the life force energy of Qi, his commentary moves away from the sensational and into a space of comparative spirituality. In these moments, Devereaux appears less concerned with persuading the reader of extraordinary experiences and more focused on articulating a personal framework through which disparate belief systems can be meaningfully reconciled, contemplative and not theatrical. As a result, Devereaux presents a paradox, a narrator whose stylistic excess undermines confidence, yet whose philosophical references demonstrate genuine literacy. The reader is therefore left not with a clear verdict on truth or falsehood, but with a more unsettling ambiguity, one in which credibility falters not because the ideas themselves are implausible, but because the medium through which they are conveyed may be ill-suited to their expression. And this is arguably nowhere more apparent than in Devereaux's description of his confrontation with the demon said to have got its metaphorical, or indeed very physical, claws into Phil. As mentioned previously, it is not made clear whether or not this exchange took place in the physical with a flesh and blood, short and squat monster, or inside the meditative mental space of his mind's eye. To use terms better suited to the magician, whether he was working on the astral plane or the material one. If it is the former, the astral, then more allowances could be made in terms of believing his story. If Devereaux genuinely meant that a demon physically manifested in Phil's flat living room and proceeded to have what can only be described as typical British banter, replete with expletives and sarcasm, back and forth with a rogue magician, and credulity is well and truly stretched beyond reason. At its core, with Devereaux's creative excess removed, the story of Phil is comparatively very believable when examined alongside other cases of demonic possession, oppression, and exorcism. The symptoms, nightmares, loss of energy, fear, and psychic unease are all very standard in these sorts of cases, as is the cause, magical dabbling. So very many accounts point to rituals gone wrong, misuse of Ouija boards, and other magical mishaps as the reason for demonic entanglement. Not only that, from my own sources, I know that people who work in the City of London, one of the financial capitals of the world, are much more likely to turn to the occult to provide both guidance and expedience within the workplace than the general public might expect. Divination pendulums, tarot cards, and even elaborate ritual workings have no doubt guided more financial decisions with extremely real-world consequences than most would be comfortable admitting. That is to say, from my own experiences and knowledge, the bare-bones story is very credible. Then, of course, there is the solution: magical binding. According to the system laid out by Dion Fortune and others, there is no such place as a way. Thus, both ethically and realistically, one cannot simply send something negative to some other place and not expect it either to A, return, or B, cause problems for someone else. This is what the Christian concept of hell, for example, provides: a convenient storehouse for those demons cast out from the bodies of demoniacs by exorcists. For Devereaux, the piece of black obsidian served as the place to send the demon. We find parallels all throughout the mystical world, for example with genies in bottles and Dybbuk boxes. So again, the bare-bones story is credible. All of this to say, after reading his memoir, Devereaux by no means fulfills the criteria of a living saint. He stands in many ways as the antithesis to the holy Catholic exorcist we might more ordinarily read about in such cases of spiritual warfare. But in reality, the world is complicated and honest and thus gritty, and certainly has space in it for people like Devereaux. Whilst mine and his paths have never crossed, I do know and know of several people like him. Wonderfully, very humanly flawed individuals who are exceptionally well-meaning and use a variety of alternative and blended traditions that are certainly not Catholic, but are philosophically sound in order to resolve negative paranormal experiences successfully. And so, might Devereaux's story of Phil and the demon be just that, a story? Absolutely. But might it also share the undoubtedly creatively embellished truth of real things that have really happened? Yes. It may just be that this truth subverts genred expectation. The assumption of insanity is contrary to all logic and common sense. Attacks of delirium are not stopped by sprinkling with holy water or touching with particles of the Holy Cross. Such are the words of Father Erasmus Horner, a priest within the Vicariate of Natal, South Africa. He was attached to a Catholic mission dedicated to St. Michael, whose work included a school for native children. In 1906, he became involved in the case of a 16-year-old Christian Zulu girl who exhibited an awful abundance of diabolical symptoms. Horrific physical elongation of parts of her body, including the neck, instances of violent levitation, the ability to communicate in languages beyond her knowledge, superhuman strength, telepathy, speaking in a demonic voice, and much more. The story began in the summer when the girl Clara Germana Tele, or anglicised to Sally as per later accounts, confided in Father Erasmus that she had pledged her services to the forces of evil, that she had made a deal with the devil. By September, she was said to have been utterly consumed by demonic possession, with Father Erasmus and the other priests and sisters with whom he worked at the mission struggling to manage Germana's worsening and increasingly uncontrollable behaviour. There was only one solution: Writing to Dr. Henri Delal, the Bishop of Natal, the rector of the mission requested the permission required for Father Erasmus to perform an exorcism. Before too long, however, a second girl succumbed to the demonic and what is said to have been bodily invasion by 7 demons, resulting in the case of Clara Germana Telle surviving to this day as one of the most sensational and chilling instances of demonic possession ever recorded. My name is Laura, and you are watching The Paranormal Scholar. It was on the 5th of July 1906 that a 16-year-old Germana handed her confessor, Father Erasmus, a slip of paper that professed her satanic servitude. The reason for Germana making the diabolical pact is unclear, with Father Erasmus, in his contemporary report, citing a history of abuse and her parents, who practiced the indigenous Zulu religion, having cursed her as contributing factors. What is known, however, is that by 9:30 in the morning of the 13th of September that same year, Germana had undergone her first exorcism. Germana was, so the father wrote, raving and howling by the time he began the rite. In the days and weeks prior, she had demonstrated extreme violence towards him and others at the mission, including gnashing her teeth and tearing at her clothes. Holy objects, including saints' relics and holy water, repulsed her entirely. Her eyes, so the father wrote, pierced with rage, and she violently writhed, trying to hit and punch the sisters at the mission. When she was successful, the force of her blows was so strong that they deeply bruised the sisters' arms. Beyond this, the teenage girl's behavior stretched into the impossible. Almost daily, it was written, the girl would levitate, floating to a height of 4 to 5 feet, sometimes lifting off the ground in spite of the sisters holding her down. And not only did the attempts of others to stop her levitating fail, they actually, on more than one occasion, resulted in those trying to pull her down being lifted also. Germana, in horrific fits of diabolical influence, would rise from the ground both horizontally and vertically, with even her clothes described as defying gravity. Impossibly, they would cling closely to her body, as if she existed in a bubble of unseen physics-repulsing energy. Her body was also said to have physically altered under the pressure of demonic attack. In a letter written about the case a year later by the Bishop of Natal, Germana's face was described as swelling up suddenly so that she could not even open her eyes. Other times, according to Father Erasmus, Germana would stretch, her neck appearing 2 and 3 times its normal length. At times, her arms and limbs would stretch amid cracking noises, as if they were about to break. It was horrific. A 16-year-old girl, tormented spiritually and physically by forces, so it seemed, that were beyond material understanding. And so, as the exorcism began in September 1906, Germana is said to have entered a preternatural rage similar to that which she had previously demonstrated. According to Father Erasmus, the sound she made was simply indescribable, like the roar and tumult of great armies battling in the air. At times, so the priest wrote, it seemed as if all these noises emanated from Germana. Then again, the uproar seemed to be in the church and in the air outside. Before too long, the priest had perspiration rolling down his face. Struggling to stop her from attacking those present, the father was forced to order that she be clapped in handcuffs and her arms and feet tied together. This, however, was no easy task. According to the priest, we succeeded only after 3 hours in finally handcuffing her. Her arms were stiff and almost unbendable, and she was continually being lifted up with her chair by the evil one, amid ear-deafening noises and pandemonium. At one point during the struggle, Germana, just as her right arm was being restrained, is said to have jerked loose from the 2 girls holding her, so as to attack a woman in attendance called Sister Anacleta. The sister was, so the priest's report described, grabbed by the throat with such an iron hold that she was nearly choked. All the while, the chair on which the demonically possessed young woman sat levitated once again, the result being that Sister Anacleta, still in the vice grip of the possessed woman, touched the floor only with the point of her shoes. A fast struggle ensued, with all hurrying to free the trapped sister and save her from being throttled to unconsciousness by Germana. The teenage girl finally restrained, Father Erasmus was able to continue the exorcism. He commanded the evil spirit possessing the girl to abandon his victim. When he reached the part of the ritual that commanded Thou Old Serpent to conjure and make itself known, Germana is said to have screamed pitifully, before once again attacking Sister Anacleta, this time biting her on the arm. Once again, there was a struggle to free the sister from the raging young woman. According to the priest, there were, gruesomely, red, blue and green marks corresponding to the 2 rows of teeth of Germana, but between them appeared a small red wound, such as is caused by a snake's bite or a needle. The following day, the strange wound had blistered and was leaking yellow fluid. The more the priest commanded the demon to depart, the more enraged the young woman is said to have become. She is claimed to have spoken in a voice that was not her own, bellowing, as Father Erasmus wrote, as Satan himself, with the sound being so awful that it pierced through marrow and bone. Again, the girl is said to have levitated in her chair, screaming like a wild animal, before the battle finally returning to the floor. There she is claimed to have writhed and twisted like one in the agony of death, before, in one final moment, stretching out her body to full length. Germana fell still. The exorcism was over, and she, at least for now, was free of the demon. As Father Erasmus wrote in his report, to make absolutely certain that she was free, we renewed the exorcism in the evening, but Germana remained calm, singing and praying heartedly with the rest. Then, a few months later, toward the end of January 1907, Germana stated that she would be possessed again. The demon, so it seemed, was announcing its return. This time, things were even worse. In addition to the violence, physical impossibilities, and frequent levitations, Germana now boasted unnatural knowledge of hidden things, events that would come to pass, and also secret information about others at the school and attached to St. Michael's mission. Not only that, a second Zulu girl called Monica also started exhibiting strange symptoms. The demonic possession was, so it seemed, spreading. In a dramatic and unusual turn of events, the Bishop of Natal, Dr. Henri Delal, arrived at the mission, along with 2 priests. This was the 24th of April 1907, and he, concerned by what he considered to be hysteria at the mission, intended to put an end to the drama. As the bishop stated in a letter he wrote about the case a year later, I was very much annoyed and hardly believed it was a case of possession, but rather I put it down to hysterics. He had only reluctantly agreed to the first exorcism. Upon arriving at the mission, the bishop was irritated to discover a crowd had gathered in eager expectation of him delivering the 2 girls from the devil. And thus, as he wrote, unless I wanted to lose all prestige and authority in the native's mind, I turned to our Lord and told him the whole thing was now his affair, and he had to help me. Despite his initial incredulity, by the time the bishop left, he was utterly convinced that Germana and the new girl Monica had been possessed by the devil. Aided by 5 priests, the bishop was engaged in the ceremony of exorcism from early morning until late at night. Violent as before, Germana is said to have resisted and indeed attempted to physically repel the efforts of the Catholic squadron. Teeth gnashing, biting, levitation. Monica, the other girl to be affected by unnatural behavior, was likewise. According to the exorcist's report, she was possessed by 7 demons, which, by the conclusion of the exorcism, were forced to depart from her body. As for Germana, she is said, rather sensationally, to have understood every language in which she was addressed. Latin, Polish, German, French. Though she had studied none, and though she had never heard a syllable spoken in most of these foreign languages. As far as those present were concerned, this was because she was not herself. Her body, her tongue, were being controlled by some other entity. And not only could it comprehend multiple languages, the demonically possessed girl would even ridicule the priests in Latin, calling attention to mistakes and at times making fun of certain words, stressing them in a peculiar manner and singing them mischievously in an effort to disturb the work of the bishop and his team. It seemed to be that Germana, or rather the evil spirit controlling her, relished the attention and sought to disrupt and mock all that was holy. During a particularly dramatic struggle between the demoniac and the bishop, the demon was asked to give its name. According to the letter written by the bishop, Germana refused to say it. Further commandment, and she is described as saying, "I can't, but I'll spell it. D-I-O-A-R." When she was asked to reveal the name of her master, she once again protested, saying that she was unable. In the end, she spelled that too, writing the name letter by letter in the air with her finger. It was, so the bishop wrote, Lucifer. As hours passed and the heat of the exorcism grew, the controlling entity is said to have changed tactics. Understanding that the bishop and his priests would not leave until the entity departed, the terrible voice that came from Germana's mouth begged to be allowed to go into another girl at the mission called Anastasia. Eventually, the bishop called for a break. It was 9 in the evening. They had started the exorcism 7 hours before, at 2 o'clock. The next morning, the bishop, concerned for the safety of Anastasia, sent her away from the mission. Eerily, when he resumed the exorcism of Germana, she, again in an unnatural voice, is reported to have said, "You have sent away Anastasia. I can see her with another girl on their way to another mission, but I'll find her again." Given that she had been separated from the rest of the mission school, there was no way that she could have known this. In the end, the bishop and his priests were successful. Similar to the exorcism performed by Father Erasmus a few months earlier, Germana is said to have fell to the floor and moaned with awful pains at the conclusion of the rite. The sign of the cross, then there was a kind of convulsion and she remained motionless as if dead. With the departure of the demon, the bishop wrote that the room was overwhelmed by a foul stench. After that, Germana was free and stayed that way until 6 years later, on the 14th of March 1913, when she passed away at the tragic age of just 22, of what Father Erasmus described a quick consumption. Undoubtedly, the case of Clara Germana Telle is difficult to comprehend, difficult to believe. It presents, through the written testimonies of both Father Erasmus and the Bishop of Natal, the entire diabolical cornucopia of behaviour associated with demonic possession, asking the reader to suspend material belief and accept the ability of a young woman, physically and spiritually surrendered to evil, to levitate, elongate her limbs and neck, and speak in voices and languages that were not her own. And yet, the case, as Father Erasmus informs us via his reports, was witnessed by many. The first round of possession and exorcism alone was observed by 3 priests, 3 brothers, 14 sisters, and more than 150 natives. By the time the Bishop of Natal became personally involved in the spring of 1907, that number had increased. Despite his initial incredulity, by the end of it, the bishop was entirely convinced that what he had witnessed and indeed helped to drive away was demonic. Concluding the letter he later wrote for a periodical in Rome, he stated, "If anyone can explain the signs, the symptoms, the words and the cure otherwise than by possession, he will be more clever than I." Moreover, in the midst of the seemingly diabolical happenings, both he and Father Erasmus attempted to debunk the activity, with them both writing in their separate accounts of how they would try to catch Germana out by swapping holy water for ordinary water and concealing holy relics. As the father described, she always reacted when sprinkled with holy water, but only laughed when sprayed with ordinary water. We demonstrated this repeatedly. As for the levitation, there was, according to their reports, simply no explaining it. This, so Father Erasmus detailed, occurred frequently in the presence of many witnesses, including the bishop. And certainly, as impossible as it may sound, acts of demonically induced levitation are found in other cases, not merely those in close historical proximity to that of Germana, but far further back in time.